intent of defaming the country's security institutions on behest of a few people.
Whatever the outcome of the recent election, there's little optimism amongst journalists about a shift in policy towards the press. Government after government has curtailed press freedom, threatening the very idea that Pakistan is a democratic nation. Journalists who don't fall in line say they're paying a heavy price in the fight for free speech. Assignment was presented by me, Mubin Nazar, and the producers were Masood Khan and Caroline Bailey.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and you're listening to CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. It's 3 minutes to 6 o'clock, and it's calm out there, which is kind of nice. It's still crisp, but calm. Our high today in Winnipeg will be -7, and we're going to have a cloudy day ahead. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your Thursday morning on the morning show. We're here until 8:37 AM. If you have a problem in traffic, 788-3093. It was a little bit slick in the city of Winnipeg. That's pretty usual for this time of year after they've scraped down that snow. Some icy spots out there to beware of. Let's say good morning to the team. Good morning, Mr. Corey Funk, who is directing the show, and we'll cover the commute and weather. Good morning to May McKillop. Good morning, May. May's behind the controls today, filling in for Abby. And good morning to Brad Lillies, who's behind the YouTube controls. Heather Wells is in also, and she is here with our local news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, some staff allege the Manitoba Teachers Society has become toxic. The union has about 70 support and administrative workers at its Winnipeg headquarters. Some staff have filed grievances, according to the Teamsters. That's the union for those Teachers Society workers. Sources tell CBC News at least 10 workers have taken leave from work. We'll hear more about that story. And the chief of a Lake Winnipeg First Nation says he is still in shock at how the city failed to inform his and other communities on the lake of that massive sewage spill earlier this month. That spill, of course, in South Winnipeg, dumping more than 230 million litres of raw sewage into the Red River, which makes its way into Lake Winnipeg. We're going to hear from the chief of Broken Head Ojibwe First Nation coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells, of course, with us throughout the whole morning with news updates. Well, in the first hour of our program, we were hearing this week about how some settlement agencies are being overrun by people right now. They're just really trying to keep up with all the demands of refugees specifically coming into Manitoba and into Winnipeg looking to settle, including from Sudan. The civil war continues there. The humanitarian situation is growing worse. We'll look deeper at what is happening there. And also about a new federal program that is helping to bring Sudanese Canadians, bring family members to safety. So we'll look at that in the first hour. Also, we'll hear more about Daniel Blakey, who yesterday announced he's leaving federal politics, but he's going to start with provincial.
Perceptive panelists, 5 blockbuster books, 4 days of smart and sassy deliberation and debate, but there can only be one winner, the best book to carry us forward. Hi, I'm Ali Hassan, and I'm hosting Canada's favorite book battle, Canada Reads 2024. One book to carry us forward. Starts Monday on CBC Radio 1, CBC Listen, and CBC Gem. For more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Health Minister Mark Holland is expected to table the bill paving the way for national pharmacare today. It is an essential part of the supply and confidence agreement between the Liberal and NDP. And it comes a day before a deadline put in place by the new Democrats to table the bill. Janice McGregor is on the story for us from Ottawa. Janice, what are we expecting this bill to look like?
Marcia, the big win NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was celebrating last weekend is that the system today's legislation is expected to lay out is a universal one, not a stopgap program covering only low-income vulnerable groups like the dental care scheme that these two parties collaborated on earlier, backstopping only people who don't have plans already. This is expected to be a single-payer plan to cover everyone. But it wouldn't cover every drug, at least not initially. something the Parliamentary Budget Officer estimated last fall would cost governments over $11 billion. That kind of money isn't coming in this spring's budget. Instead, they're starting with two large categories of drugs. Prescriptions for the roughly 4 million diabetics in Canada will now be covered, as will medications for millions of others at risk of diabetes. And the Liberals are poised to finally keep their 2019 election promise to cover sexual and reproductive health medications, not only meeting the contraception needs of millions, but perhaps setting up a useful political wedge with social conservatives, because the morning after pill, for example, could be covered under that category. We'll see today if the government gives us a budget preview, estimates how much starting with just these two categories of drugs will cost initially. But the NDP's hope is that this is only the beginning, more drugs to come as future budgets allow.
But healthcare is provincial jurisdiction. Is there consensus among the provinces on this bill?
No. British Columbia and Manitoba both have provincial NDP governments, and they're supportive. They're likely to be the first movers here to sign on. But even without seeing the bill, Alberta and Quebec have said no thank you, something New Democrat Alexandre Boulris yesterday said would be a mistake.
25% of people in Canada are not taking the medication they need for their own health. It's incredible. And the collective cost of this is unmanageable. So, if Daniel Smith and François Legault want to take that road, they will have to explain to their own citizens.
Other provinces remain in wait-and-see mode. As with the childcare deals, getting buy-in across the board might come down to how much money's on the table.
All right, thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. The fate of Quebec's controversial secularism law could be determined today. The province's highest court, the Court of Appeal, will issue its ruling on the constitutionality of Bill 21. The 5-year-old law bans government employees in position of authority from wearing religious symbols. Today's decision is the latest for this legislation that has seen years of court challenges. Sarah Levitt reports.
This legislation violates the rights of religious minorities.
Harney Sivalingam is with the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, one of the several groups that's been challenging Bill 21 in court to argue it's discriminatory. In 2019, the Quebec government forced the law through using the notwithstanding clause. It meant teachers, judges, and other public servants aren't allowed to wear religious symbols, including the hijab, kippah, cross, or turban. The Superior Court decision upheld the law in 2021, with a few exceptions. That led both the government and the groups to appeal. The Legault government recently tabled a bill to renew the use of the notwithstanding clause for Bill 21 to shield its law from constitutional challenges.
Those lower judgments really lay the kind of textual terrain for what the Supreme Court will do.
Robert Leckie is the dean of McGill University's Faculty of Law. He says today's decision is important because it seems certain the case will go to the Supreme Court of Canada.
We've got a trial decision. We'll now have an appellate decision. These things build in a very important way the record that will reach the Supreme Court of Canada.
The decision from the Quebec Court of Appeal is expected this afternoon. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
Mexico is threatening to require visas for Canadian visitors soon. It is in retaliation for Canada's plan to reinstate visa requirements for Mexicans entering this country. Sources have told Radio-Canada and CBC News the change will take effect at 11:30 Eastern this morning. Reaction has been mixed. Radio-Canada spoke to some Mexicans with ties to Canada at the Vancouver airport.
That's very upsetting for us. For our family, it means another step or another boundary, because now they will have to apply in order to come here to Canada and, well, visit their their granddaughter. And
I think it's becoming necessary. It's a problem for the U.S. border because people are crossing illegally. So I think when rules are being broken like that, then having the restriction is necessary to put things in order.
Both the United States and Quebec Premier François Legault have been asking the federal government to bring back visa requirements. They argue it would help curb an increase in illegal crossings from Canada into the States. The Immigration and Refugee Board says more than 25,000 Mexicans applied for asylum in Canada last year. That makes Mexico the top source of asylum claims. Both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are venturing south to separate Texas border towns today. Millions of undocumented migrants are entering the U.S. It has become a high-stakes political issue heading into November's presidential election. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington. And Richard, what can we expect today?
Yeah, I think we can expect to see a highly choreographed split-screen rivalry where Joe Biden and Donald Trump will offer competing views on how to fix America's immigration system. This has emerged as one of the key issues in November's election. Biden will head to the border town of Brownsville, where he's expected to pressure Congress to revive that bipartisan border security deal that Republicans supported until former President Trump told them to reject it. Now, this plan would tighten asylum restrictions and create daily limits on border crossings. This will be Biden's second trip to the border since taking office, which many view as a notable change in strategy to become more forceful to address illegal immigration, one of Biden's biggest vulnerabilities in this election.
And how about Trump and the Republicans?
Yeah, so Donald Trump will be about 500 kilometers away at Eagle Pass. That's a hot spot for illegal crossings. Now, Trump built his political career on portraying illegal immigrants as criminals and promising to build a wall along the border. He's since promised mass deportations if he wins the elections and took aim at illegal immigrants on social media.
Our country is being overrun by criminals, by murderers, by drug addicts. They're all coming in through Joe Biden's horrible open border.
Now, these two leaders don't agree on much, if anything, but both share the view there's a crisis along the southern border, but say the other party is responsible for it.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. For years, there had been speculation about two scientists fired from Canada's top infectious disease lab in Winnipeg. The real reason for their termination has been a mystery until now. As Karen Pauls tells us, a new report by Canada's spy agency confirms what many suspected. It had to do with the couple's ties to China.
Subsequent termination of the employment of two scientists.
After years of questions and political wrangling, we now know why Jian Guochu and her husband Keating Cheng were fired from the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg. Mark Holland is the health minister.
They weren't disclosing information. They weren't disclosing relationships.
Chu is part of an award-winning team that developed Canada's Ebola vaccine. Now, intelligence assessments also show she and her husband shared infectious viruses and scientific research with China, had a close and clandestine relationship with Chinese officials, and were considered a credible threat to Canada's economic security.
Will he acknowledge espionage was involved in the Winnipeg lab incident?
For years, opposition politicians have fought for details to be released, accusing the government of using national security to shield itself from embarrassment. The health minister says
there was an inadequate understanding of the threat of foreign interference.
But security experts like Wesley Wark are skeptical.
We knew a lot and had known a lot for at least a decade about Chinese foreign interference activities in Canada.
Christian Leuprecht teaches at the Royal Military College of Canada.
This would have been deeply injurious to our relationship with China, and so I think the government made a political decision.
As for the lab, it says it's beefed up its security protocols and the rules for collaborating and sharing research with other countries. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on YouTube or on 89.3 FM or on the CBC Listen app. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. This is your morning show for Thursday, February 29th. We only get to say that every 4 years. It is Leap Day, and we're going to actually later on in the program talk to someone who was born on this day. He's 68, technically 17 if you go by the rules, so that'll be a fun interview. In addition, this hour on the program, we're going to hear more about MP Daniel Blakey, NDP MP, who's leaving federal politics for a job in Manitoba's NDP government, so that's straight ahead. Also this hour on the program, an illness threatening to wildlife. Chronic wasting disease is a condition that can affect deer and elk, caribou and moose. and it's spreading to more regions of Canada. We'll talk about its prevalence, and we'll also talk about where we're seeing it in Manitoba. Stay tuned. So those stories are coming up. Right now, let's get developments on other stories from Heather Wells, who's in our news center.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg foster home provider that was giving cannabis to teens in care is blasting the province for cutting ties with the company. In a memo to staff, Spirit Rising House says, "We've done our best to work inside a system fraught with denial and turning a blind eye to the trauma and real epidemic of addiction these kids face." But the president of the Manitoba Foster Parent Association says giving kids cannabis is not harm reduction. We'll hear more on this story. And a Winnipeg man is happy city councillors are considering a traffic plan for his street. Tim Fennell's a founding member of the group called Calm Cambridge. He's been calling for traffic calming measures on Cambridge Street for years. We'll hear what's happened in that situation in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
6:12 is the time right now. Corey Funk is doing, you had to add a hat today. You're doing weather and traffic and directing.
I'm a hat guy, so
Look
it's all
at
good.
you. It's a good thing you're a runner. You're going to be running around.
Yes.
What was it like for you this
Well,
morning?
you know what? Nice day to run, actually. Even though it was cold, it's minus 19 right now here in Winnipeg. It wasn't nearly as windy as the past couple of days.
Agreed.
Yeah, it didn't hurt my face as much to come in this morning. And, it's only going to get warmer as the day goes on. Looks like that cold snap, knock on wood, is more or less over for the time being. Heading for a high today of -7 with some light snow here in Winnipeg. And then it's just going to dip down not too much overnight to -9 and partly cloudy. Then high tomorrow, get this, 5 degrees all of a sudden. It's going to feel tropical compared to what we've had this week. Exactly. Yep. 5 degrees and sunny tomorrow, and then -8 on the weekend. Saturday is the high, and then -5 Sunday is the high. So looking for some nice weather ahead, at least down south. Up north, though, right now, there is a snowfall warning in effect for Flin Flon, Cranberry Portage, Snow Lake, Thompson, Nelson House, Split Lake, Lynn Lake, Leaf Rapids, Puckatawagan, Gillam, and Shamattawa right now. 10 to 15 centimeters is expected for that region right now, going from west to east through the day. To come through now until Friday. So look out for that as well. Extreme cold warning in effect for Thompson, Nelson House, but like that whole area as well. It's -30 to -40 degrees, and then with the wind, it's going to feel more like -45. So very, very cold for you up north this morning. So bundle up if you can. I'll have a closer look at the regions later on, but right now it is -19 at the Forks. Traffic right now, very, very straightforward. Doesn't look like there are any major issues out there on the highways or here in the city. Sidewalks still a little bit slippery. Do look out for that, depending where you are. Bike lanes are actually pretty clear, at least it looked like on my way in. But if you see anything else going on out there, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, as you may have been hearing in our CBC News, Winnipeg New Democrat MP Daniel Blakey is leaving federal politics for a job here, back home with Manitoba's NDP government. He broke the news in Ottawa yesterday. He said he will step down from his Elmwood-Transcona seat at the end of March. He says he's taking a job as a senior advisor on intergovernmental affairs with Premier Wab Kinew. Blakey was first elected in 2015 and recaptured the Elmwood-Transcona seat for the NDP from the Conservatives. The seat has a long NDP history and was held for a long time by Blakey's late father, Bill Blakey. Daniel Blakey spoke with CBC's Bartley Kivas about this yesterday.
Well, an opportunity presented itself to go work with Premier Kinew and the new government in Manitoba. And, I've got a young family and have been hoping to find a way to spend more time with my young kids and with my wife. And when the opportunity came up to get to continue in the vein of work that I've been doing for a while now and continue to try to get things done for people and, implement better public policy, but get to be in my own bed every night and be able to take my kids to hockey during the week and things like that. It was an opportunity I didn't want to pass up.
First, I'm going to ask you about the work that you will be doing for the NDP government here in Manitoba. What does the Senior Advisor of Intergovernmental Affairs do?
Well, my understanding is that I'll be helping the government in Manitoba liaise with the federal government and provincial and territorial governments whenever, if Manitoba is looking to see investment from the federal government. I mean, I think one of the hallmarks of the last government, in my view, is that they often let disagreements on certain issues get in the way of being able to attract federal investment into Manitoba. And, I've worked pretty hard on Parliament Hill with people from all parties to show that even when there's disagreements on some substantive issues, that you can still get things done and you can still make progress on issues of common concern that you can identify. And so that's the spirit that I'm going to bring to that job on behalf of Manitoba, working with the Premier to bring more federal dollars into Manitoba and to work collaboratively with provinces on issues of common concern.
If polls are to be believed, a change of government is possible in the next federal election, and that could very well mean a Conservative majority. How well would you, a former NDP MP, be able to work with a Conservative government along with Premier Wab Kinew here?
Well, pretty well, I think, in spite of the fact that there are some significant differences of opinion. I think, I've shown here on Parliament Hill, including in this Parliament with, Marilyn Gladu, who had a bill on pension reform that took up some ideas that New Democrats have been championing for a long time. And we were able to compromise and amend the bill in order to make it better and see it pass to provide more protection for Canadians' pensions. So that's just one example of where I think I've shown I can work with Conservatives. I've shown that I can work with Liberals. I can work with people with whom I have serious disagreements on some issues and not let that get in the way of making progress where progress can be made.
Now, what, if anything, forgive me, would this suggest about Mr. Singh's ability to increase the NDP seat count in the next federal election or even win? What would your departure, a veteran person leaving, what does this say about Mr. Singh's chances next time?
Well, I think Mr. Singh has demonstrated great leadership in this Parliament. If you look at all the things that New Democrats are getting done as part of his team, I'm very optimistic about the NDP's fortunes in Elmwood-Transcona after I leave, and I look forward to seeing Jagmeet have continued success, and I hope grow his caucus in the next election. A lot of people forget, but heading into the election in 2019, the NDP was polling around 9%. We're typically polling over 20% today under Jagmeet's leadership after a number of parliaments where he's proven that he's putting the focus on people and getting things done for people as opposed to the kind of partisan point scoring that too often goes on here in Ottawa. So I'm very confident that Jagmeet's going to continue in that vein and that New Democrats are going to continue to deliver results for people.
Whenever an MP leaves midterm, though, people think, there's part of this may be the difficulty in winning the seat the next time. What would you say to that idea?
That's not part of my consideration. As I say, I'm very confident about the NDP's ability to hold Elmwood-Transcona as a seat. I think we have to continue to work for it. I don't think we can take anything for granted, but that's always been the case. You don't want to take things for granted in politics. There's a lot of great people in Elmwood-Transcona who believe in good public policy, making a difference in people's lives, and have shown that they're willing to elect folks that are willing to come to Ottawa and fight for that. And I don't see any reason why that's going to change, and look forward to having a successor who carries on in that tradition.
Do the changes in the boundaries that add Anola and Dugald to the riding, and these are traditionally more conservative areas, does that make it more difficult for the NDP to hold that seat?
Again, I think we have a very good chance of holding that seat, even with the boundary changes. I mean, I think what a lot of people from Transcona know is that a lot of people in Dugald and Anola are folks who have Transcona connections, and indeed sometimes people who lived in Transcona and then decided they wanted to have a little more land and moved just outside the city. So I'm optimistic about our chances to hold Elmwood-Transcona.
What does this mean for the Blakey dynasty? Your late father served for a long time. You served. There was pressure on your siblings. Does this mean no more Blakeys at any level of government anywhere?
Well, that's hard to say with finality. Of course, it's up to others to decide what they want to do in their own lives and with their own careers. But certainly for me, for now, I'm happy going to work for the new government in Manitoba and trying to make sure that Manitoba gets its fair share of federal funding under any number of different programs and initiatives, whether that's under the current government or possibly under another government. And looking forward to seeing Manitoba take its place on the national stage, working with other provinces on issues of common concern.
That is New Democrat MP Daniel Blakey speaking with CBC's Bartley Kivas about his decision to leave federal politics. He will, as you heard, be taking a job with Manitoba's NDP government. He broke the news yesterday in Ottawa.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
It is 6:22 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app or YouTube this morning. Hi, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team at the show. Behind the glass today, Brad Lillies, as well as Corey Funk and May McKillop. Mostly cloudy in the city of Winnipeg this morning. It's minus 19. Our high is going to be minus 7 and some light snow beginning for us this morning. Different story up north. Extreme cold warning does continue now for Thompson, Lynn Lake, Brochet, Tuduli, Gillam, and Shamattawa. So you're going to be around, Thompson right now is a minus 41. Very much like yesterday. And we have a snowfall warning as well. So unlike yesterday, today we're expecting 10 to 15 centimeters of snow up in Flin Flon, Thompson, Lynn, Gillam, and Shamattawa, as well as Leaf, Cranberry, Portage, Snow Lake, Nelson House, Split, and Puckatawagan. So you'll get that snow moving through the day, starting sort of today, but then also moving through the day tomorrow as well. Well, next on the show, as you may have been hearing in our news this week, a Winnipeg nonprofit that helps asylum seekers claim refugee status says it's struggling to keep up with growing demand for its services. Healthy Muslim Families says its wait times for people looking for help with filing their asylum applications have jumped from 1 week to as long as 4 weeks in recent months. And one of the countries that people are arriving from is Sudan. 10 months into the civil war there, the situation in Sudan remains dire, and it is expected to get worse in the coming months. Thousands have been killed, millions of people have been displaced. Many are facing starvation, disease, and sexual violence. This week, federally, Canada launched a new program to bring a select number of Sudanese people to Canada. This program allows Canadian citizens and permanent residents to apply to sponsor eligible family members. And to talk about it, Rania El-Fil is with us. She is the former president of the Mississauga Sudanese Canadian Cultural Association. Good morning.
Morning. Hi, Marcy.
So tell me a bit about the new sponsorship program and how it's being received by the Sudanese community.
The sponsorship program is a family sponsorship. So basically, you can bring your first degree relative, a father, mother, siblings, and kids over 22 if you were not able to bring them in the past, or grandkids, grandparents. As an anchor in Canada, you have to show certain financial ability before you can sponsor your family, as you should be able to care for them, provide for them, and help them integrate as they come to Canada. It's been a window of hope and was really received with a lot of excitement, but also it's been an exhausting, I think, past 2 months since the announcement of the program, as everyone was scrambling to prepare the exhaustive list of documentation and meet whatever is needed to meet the requirements of the program, just because of the situation and the war and how people fled for safety. A lot of people left with no proper documentation, right? They left their passports and paperwork behind, and now they have to find solutions for that. There is also a logistical nightmare around they have to get somewhere, and sometimes they have to cross a war zone and hazardous situations before they can get there for police clearances and so on. There is also the worry around the cap. So I've seen people in the past 2 days, like literally with no sleep, trying to finish those very complicated application process with some technical issues happening to be able to meet the cap.
Did you just see some technical issues happening to meet the cap?
The technical issues is actually on the forms itself that's been released. So we're working with IRCC closely to resolve those issues so people are able to submit their applications.
Now, the federal government, when you look at the numbers, speaking of the cap, it says it will accept and process over 3,200 completed applications. What's your sense of that number? And is it addressing the scale of what you're seeing of people coming and needing to flee Sudan?
No, to be honest, the number has been a big issue and a concern to the community from the beginning. And if you think about the scale of the community here, and the program does not only cater for Sudanese living, the Sudanese, it caters for everyone who was living in Sudan at the time of the war and impacted by the war. So there are a lot of other communities that are looking to bring loved ones who used to live in Sudan. And Sudan was home to 1.1 million refugees before the war. And we have 10 million internally displaced, more than a million displaced in neighboring countries in very difficult situations. So the scale of and the impact of the war is huge, and the number is really small, especially given that this is a family sponsorship. So the anchor here in Canada will be sort of showing certain financial ability or certain amount of funds to assure that they can take care of their family and provide for them for the first year of the program as they get integrated. Yes.
Given what you hear from community and the concerns you're raising about this this morning, what would you say to the government about how they could make this more effective for families that are looking to come here?
To be honest, we've been working closely to help address some of those issues with the IRCC. I think the cap is one of the biggest issues that we're looking to address. With this program, we've raised a concern around for siblings where they can bring their families, their dependents. But if those dependents are above 22 years old, they can. And we really think, especially for daughters who are older than 22 but still live with their families, that's a huge issue because no family is going to come and leave their daughters behind, especially with the horrifying number of sexual violence incidents in Sudan that we hear about. So that's a big concern that we have at this point, but we've been discussing it closely with IRCC. And to be honest, in general, we want to see the government do more on the humanitarian aspect. This, at the end, will really serve a small number of people who have family members here in Canada. But then we have the millions who are facing starvation, lack of health care, and famine.
How do you feel about the level of attention that the situation and the crisis in Sudan has been receiving?
We really feel like strongly, all the reports talked about Sudan as the forgotten crisis, and that's exactly how we feel. It's not discussed. It's not in anyone's mind. We really hope that our neighbors, Canadian, and all the Canadian community will rally and support their Sudanese Canadian community members as we've been navigating through all of this alone. It feels very lonely, to be honest, and we really can benefit from the support of the community, especially as with this program, it will have financial burdens. There is a lot of other family members that we won't be able to bring or sponsor that are facing dire situations and that we're trying to support also over there financially. And there is the mental impact of all of this happening to the Sudanese Canadian community here.
Rania, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Appreciate your time on CBC.
Thank you for having me.
It's Rania Elfil. She's the former president of the Mississauga Sudanese Canadian Cultural Association. She joined us from Mississauga, Ontario. And if you are part of our Sudanese community here in Manitoba and you want to reach out, 788-3205 if you want to connect with the program to add your thoughts to this discussion. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us. Traffic so far so good out there. If you do need to reach us, though, 788-3093. Could be a little slick if you are walking. We have business news coming up. Phil DeMonson this morning, and there's layoffs in the tech sector. Again, they keep piling up. Today, we're going to talk about how those layoffs are hurting the overall economy. So that's right after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, some light snow reported out at the airport. It's minus 19 on this extra day of February. It's leap day, and today we're looking for a near normal high of minus 7. A Winnipeg foster home provider that was giving cannabis to teens in care is blasting the province for cutting ties with the company. In a memo to staff, Spirit Rising House says, quote, "We have done our best to work inside a system fraught with denial and turning a blind eye to the trauma and real epidemic of addiction these kids face." But Jamie Fow, the president of the Manitoba Foster Parent Association, says giving kids cannabis is not harm reduction.
It sends a really dangerous message when you are essentially becoming these children's drug dealers. You're using their allowance to go purchase marijuana and handing it to them.
The province says it stands by the decision to wind down its relationship with Spirit Rising House and calls their harm reduction choices shortcuts, which put already vulnerable youth at risk. The Union for Manitoba Teachers is facing allegations of a toxic work environment. It's led to an external investigation and a number of employees taking a leave from work. Details from CBC reporter Ian Fraze.
The Manitoba Teachers Society has around 70 support and administrative workers at its Winnipeg headquarters, and some of them say their workplace isn't safe. Teamsters is the union representing the 70 workers. It says grievances concerning alleged violations of the collective agreement and a toxic work environment are going to arbitration, but wouldn't elaborate further. People with knowledge of what's happening at MTS told CBC News at least 10 employees have taken a leave off work. Teamsters conducted a survey last year in which 57% of respondents said they considered their workplace psychologically unsafe. MTS subsequently conducted an external investigation. It says it can't reveal its findings, but is taking the complaints seriously. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A First Nations community says it is concerned about how a massive raw sewage leak earlier this month will impact the health of Lake Winnipeg. Hundreds of millions of liters of raw sewage was dumped into the Red River before Winnipeg City crews put a stop to the spill last week. Broken Head Ojibwe First Nation Chief Gordon Bluesky wants someone to monitor the lake's long-term effects.
Communities around the lake draw their drinking water and actively utilize the lake. So where do we go from here? Our lake is already in a critical state. She's already sick, and we're just making her more sick.
Bluesky says he has met with Winnipeg's mayor and the province to discuss the situation. He says Lake Winnipeg needs to be protected for future generations. A Winnipeg nonprofit says the number of people asking them for help with asylum applications has tripled in recent months. Healthy Muslim Families says asylum seekers now have to wait up to 4 weeks to get an appointment. Shelter operators have told CBC News asylum seekers are putting extra pressure on the system. Humaira Jalil is executive director at Healthy Muslim Families.
They don't have anywhere else to go. They don't have the paperwork to do anything, not work, find employment, and most of the services are not open to refugee claimants. So they have really nothing to do, and they are waiting for us, and this is the best we can do.
185 asylum claims were processed in Manitoba in January. Jalil doesn't expect the numbers to go down anytime soon. Mexico is threatening to require visas for Canadian visitors soon. It's in retaliation for Canada's plan to reinstate visa requirements for Mexicans entering this country. Sources have told Radio Canada and CBC News the change will take effect at 11:30 Eastern Time this morning. That's 10:30 Central. Reaction's been mixed. Radio Canada spoke to some Mexicans with ties to Canada at the Vancouver airport.
Very upsetting for us. Means another boundary because now they will have to apply to come here to Canada and visit their granddaughter. And
I think it's becoming necessary. It's a problem for the U.S. border because people are crossing illegally. When rules are being broken like that, then having the restriction is necessary to put things in order.
Both the United States and Quebec Premier François Legault have been asking the federal government to bring back visa requirements, saying it will help curb an increase of illegal crossings into Canada from the United States and vice versa. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. A Winnipeg man is happy city councillors are considering a traffic plan for his street. Tim Fennell is a founding member of the group Calm Cambridge. He's been calling for traffic calming measures on Cambridge Street for years. He says the street has thousands more vehicles than it was meant to handle, and drivers often ignore the 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit.
A lot of people would say, oh, well, this is an accident waiting to happen, but I would say accidents are happening, so time to do something.
The Public Works Committee is going to consider a motion calling for short-term and long-term traffic plans at its meeting next week. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
We're actually going to have that man on in the next hour for a full interview. So that's just before 8 o'clock to talk more about those traffic issues in calming Cambridge. Right now, it's time to turn our attention to weather and traffic. Corey Funk is in with both.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start off up north because there's a lot going on if you're up north today. 2 weather warnings for you. Snow and cold in areas like Thompson, Nelson House, Split Lake, Lynn Lake, Leaf Rapids, Puckatawagan, Brochates, Dooley Lake, Gillam, and Shamattawa. In terms of the cold, you're going to see overnight lows today minus 30 to minus 40. With the winds, it's going to feel more like minus 45. So very, very cold. As well, that snowfall warning in effect means about 10 to 15 centimeters expected for you today into Friday. So be careful if you are up north. In Thompson right now, it is minus 39. Heading for a high today of minus 19, but sunny. Down south here, Brandon, you're minus 14 right now, heading for a high of minus 3 with some light snow today. Dauphin, minus 18, heading for a high of minus 10 today with some light snow as well. Here in Winnipeg, we're at minus 19 at the Forks and heading for a high of minus 7 with some light snow. It looks like that cold snap, at least down south here, is going to be broken for the next little while. Plus 5 is the high tomorrow. And sunny, so get out your flip-flops, beach wear, all that good stuff.
Not quite, but maybe.
Oh yeah, I guess sweaters with cut-off sleeves. I think that's
that for sure.
That's I think
like everyone's gonna be wearing that.
Turning to traffic right now, pretty quiet out there on the roads. Haven't heard anything on the commuter line. Seems like more or less the sidewalks, bike lanes are clear. Might be a little slippery, though, so look out for that. Give me a call if you see otherwise, though. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
All right. Well, speaking of people who wear sweaters with cut-off sleeves, Phil DeMont joins us now with our business report.
Thank you for that.
With low-hanging fruit. I couldn't resist. How are you doing this morning?
Good. How are you?
Good. Let's start with some big analysis. You've been reporting on layoffs in the tech sector. They continue to pile up. This morning, though, the question is, are we seeing them hurt the overall economy, Phil?
Not so far, and it might be a bit of a surprise, but I think it's because there's a shift going on in North America's employment market, especially in the U.S. So far, first 2 months of the year, almost 200 companies worldwide have laid off about 46,000 tech workers. That puts us on track to match 2023 when companies dropped 263,000 employees. Change from half a decade ago, Marcy, 2015 to 2019. Employment among technology companies grew on average every year by 4.5%, and that's a big number. It's not the case anymore. This week, Electronic Arts laying off 5% of its workforce, 670 people. Sony Interactive, think PlayStation, dropping 900 workers. Gaming sector's been going through a restructuring for at least a year, but it's not just there. It's eBay, it's Microsoft, it's across the board. I found 4 Canadian companies on the list cutting jobs so far this year. Top Hat, Wattpad being among them there out of Toronto. Reason for the cuts, high interest rates. You'd say, yeah, but for a slightly different reason. Technology firms are having trouble borrowing money because they're considered a riskier investment than, say, a bank. So lenders now, not just because their interest rates are higher, but they're asking for a bigger premium because they're worried about the sustainability of these tech companies. Also for customers, though, with high interest rates, they have trouble affording new expensive software upgrades, artificial intelligence, companies trying to figure out how that fits into their operations. So they're hiring AI experts, but they're dropping other specialized programmers. Here's why I'm not seeing it hit the overall economy. U.S. figures, but in January, the American economy added 353,000 new jobs. 40% were in retail and the health sector. Basically, the way I'm looking at it, it's getting a bit harder to find work if you're a computer programmer or one of those people. A little easier if you're a nurse or a restaurant server.
A new study, let's go to another story. A new study says that drugs like Ozempic, which we've talked a great deal about, can actually help the economy. So what's the reasoning?
Yeah, I find it a little kind of head-scratchy, but the argument here is that the drugs help reduce the level of obesity among the U.S. population. It's an American study. That would eliminate a host of diseases and chronic condition associated with being too heavy. This comes from Goldman Sachs, and they're looking at the economic impact. So what they're saying is you get rid of those diseases, you have workers stay on the job longer, that healthier workers, it would have the U.S. GDP grow by between 0.5% and 1 full percentage point if more people take those drugs. So what we're talking about here is GLP-1 receptor agonists like Ozempic and Wegovy. They were originally designed to help with type 2 diabetes, but people discovered you could lose weight by taking these medications kind of easily. Estimates are 1.7% of the American population takes prescriptions for one of these two drugs. That's 5.6 million people. Goldman says, okay, if you bump that number up to 21 million to 42 million, just because that's where they did the study from, if they benefit from the drug, all told, these suddenly productive workers would produce an extra $500 billion to the U.S. economy over 4 years. That's a bit of a thing, but I see what they're trying to get at. A couple of caveats to the study. These treatments aren't cheap, $1,000 or so for a 4-week supply of Ozempic. So if prices keep rising, they have been, more people might not be able to afford the drug, keeps a ceiling on the number that would take it. But also the drugs do have some nasty side effects, and that could reduce the popularity when they become a little more known. Because right now it sounds like it's kind of costless to take it and you lose weight. But if all of a sudden you're having headaches and a bunch of other things, you might not be as keen.
And before we look at markets this morning, it is February 29th. It is a leap day in leap year. And I'm glad you're doing more on this because we heard a bit on World Report about a debate that happens every leap year. Are employees, Phil, working this day, February 29th, for free?
It's an odd debate, and you're right, it happens every leap year. I didn't know it was a leap year until I came in today, to be honest. But you're usually paid on a 250-day calendar. That's the working days. So why are you working the extra one, February 29th, for free? And it's real money. Statistics Canada numbers, the average Canadian gives away about $350 before taxes a day. Across 6.5 million salaried workers, that's $2 billion you're giving back to your employer. And it's all the white collars. If you get an hourly pay, you're still getting paid today. But salaried workers aren't. For worker advocate groups, the LEAP issue is a part of a broader debate about employees getting money's the road, unpaid overtime, unpaid holiday pay, that kind of stuff. And they can't add up. Last year, CIBC paid out $153 million to settle a class action lawsuit by its tellers, revolved around these workers putting in overtime without getting compensated. Advocates for getting money for the leap day say it's about fairness. Employer groups say salaried workers don't get paid per day, but for a full year. Their view is kind of, look, you might stay an extra day, an hour or two after work to finish up some work. You're not paid for that. And if you add that up, that's your day for the year. The public sector union in Ottawa has a slightly different approach. Their members are paid an extra quarter of a day each year, and thereafter after 4 years, that's the extra day.
What's up in the markets today? What are those numbers telling us?
Right now, there's a lot of inflation data coming out of Europe. So Germany, UK, up about 0.25%, waiting for that. Shanghai was up 2%, but that was bouncing back after a really weak Wednesday. Oil's up 7 cents, $78.61. Gold's down $6, $2,036 US an ounce. And the Canadian dollar, I have it off about tenth of a cent, trading at 73.58 cents US.
All right. Thanks very much, Phil.
Thanks, Marcy.
Phil Lamont from our business desk. 6:44 a.m. is the time right now on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app. I'm Marcy Marcusa. It is this leap day. Tomorrow's March already. Wow. A couple months into this 2024 year. It went fast to me. The weather this morning, minus 19 right now in Winnipeg, a high of minus 7. It is school day number 2. Well, next on the show, let's revisit a story we've been reporting on all week. On the ice, the Winnipeg Jets are having a fantastic year. The team is on pace for 113 points this season. But despite that, in the stands, attendance is down. It prompted a lot of discussion this week and analysis about whether or not the hockey team might be in trouble in the long haul. Mark Chipman had an interview with The Athletic expressing concerns about the attendance numbers. And then, of course, we had Gary Bettman, head of the NHL, in town this week as well, saying everybody simmer down and don't stress. But we have been asking you about your sensibility about the team and whether or not your relationship with spending money on season tickets has changed or not and why. And so we've been taking calls on on the Jets. Here's one listener that weighed in.
Hi, my name is Karen. In regards to the Jets attendance and the decline, I have a lot of opinions on it, but I think one of the main things is people bit off more than they could chew originally, committing to full seasons, half seasons, with the dependence of your friends and family keeping that season ticket holder viable for you to continue to have full seasons, but you're depending on your family and friends to keep that, I think is unrealistic. So that is one of the major things. And a lot of times people feel like it's all or nothing. So if I can't do a full season or I can't do a half season, then I'm not going to go at all. And for me personally, I've been a half season ticket holder, split 3 ways. So I'm going to one game a month, which is very viable for my family and very affordable. And again, people saying, well, concessions are too high, beer is too high. Well, do you need to drink all game long? Do you need to have Twizzlers, popcorn, dinner at the game? No, you don't. Can you take the bus to the game? I think maybe that's something the organization can work better on, for better bus routes or free bus rides downtown. But in the end, to me, if you are fueled by passion, you will be going to these games. You will be finding a way. And I think in the beginning, it was more just a fear of missing out. So I had to get these season tickets, because if I don't get them, somebody else will get them, and I'll never get the chance to have them again. So I think it was fueled by fear, not passion, unfortunately.
Thank you so much for the call and the thoughtful perspective. In case you're wondering about what those attendance numbers look like, in that interview we mentioned with The Athletic last week, True North Chair Mark Chipman said the Jets now have closer to 9,500 season ticket holders, and that is a drop of nearly 1/3 since the team came back. And that whole rush to get tickets happened in that first year, in those early days. You can read more about the Jets at cbc.ca/Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us here on Information Radio. Still ahead in this half hour on the program, it is an illness that affects deer and elk, caribou and moose. It attacks their brains. It causes strange behavior and ultimately death. We're going to talk to a scientist who studies chronic wasting disease. So that's still ahead. We'll also find out how it's affecting animal populations here in Manitoba. Well, Slow Leaves, a Winnipeg artist, is celebrating the release of his 5th album. It is going to be celebrated at the West End Cultural Centre tomorrow, March 1st. If you want to check it out, go to the show. Meantime, here's Slow Leaves with Happy All the Time.
I got a friend, she won't compromise. When I look down into those bedroom eyes, I can't help but see the worst in me. And then I roll onto my side.
Happy All the Time by Winnipeg artist Slow Leaves. You can find him playing tomorrow, as mentioned, at the West End Cultural Center. It is 9 minutes to 7 a.m. on our last day of February here, Leap Day. Next on the show, as I just alluded to before the tune, chronic wasting disease, or CWD, is a fatal illness that affects the brains of animals like deer, elk, caribou, or moose. And in this country, chronic wasting disease has mostly been a problem in Western Canada. But experts are warning that it is now spreading. So CWD was first detected in our province in Manitoba in 2021. Cases were concentrated entirely along the Saskatchewan border at that time, until that is this past January, when a case from the Winkler area was reported. And in a moment, we're going to talk to Debbie McKenzie, who will join us. She's a professor at the University of Alberta in the Department of Biological Sciences and the Centre for Prions and Protein Folding Diseases. So stay with us here. We're just having a challenge with our phone line, but we'll get our guest up with us in a moment to talk about chronic wasting disease. Meantime, while we're waiting for that, let's talk about what's coming up in the next hour of the show. After 7 o'clock, if you, I just mentioned, last day of February, that means that university application deadlines are coming up. So we're going to talk to the Director of Student Recruitment at the University of Manitoba about what people should know before submitting their application. So that's coming up right after 7 o'clock. And then a little bit later in the show, speaking of leap year, the other thing we were talking about this half hour. Today only happens on your calendar every 4 years. So we're going to talk to someone who is born on this day. They are 68 years old, or 17 if you're only counting the leap years. So that's all coming up a little later. Right now, though, to that interview I mentioned about chronic wasting disease, and Debbie McKenzie does join us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how concerned should people in Canada be about chronic wasting disease, especially since you're talking to us here in Manitoba, where, as we mentioned, it was first detected?
It's a growing concern across Canada, particularly the prairie provinces, and it's now been detected in British Columbia. As we see the number of animals infected continuing to increase, it is going to have an impact on the cervid populations.
Tell us a little bit more about where this came from in the first place.
We don't exactly know where what the origins were. It was observed in white-tailed deer and mule deer in Colorado and Wyoming back in the 1960s, described as a prion disease in the early 1980s, and since then has spread to four provinces and 31 states by both normal movement, migration patterns, movements of deer, as well as getting a little help from humans by putting animals on trucks and moving them around.
Some people have used the term zombie deer disease. How does it actually affect the animals and eventually kill them?
I don't really like the name zombie deer disease. I don't think it quite describes it as it should. But what happens in this disease is that animals are affected or infected orally. And with time, the prion protein, infectious prion protein, converts the normal prion protein to the abnormal form, and it spreads from the digestive tract ultimately into the brain, where it causes neurons to die.
Do you have any sense of why our province has sort of been at different points sort of central to the story? First detected in Manitoba, and then also in January, the case in the Winkler area. Is there anything about the way that you see patterns of migration for animals or the way animals move that might make us, should we be more concerned in Manitoba about this?
I think that you're just seeing the natural movement of deer across the landscape. One of the things to keep in mind is that often by the time that we detect a case, there's been many more undetected cases. If there's less than 1% of the animals are infected, it's going to be less likely to actually pick it up in the surveillance. So I think just as animals have been moving across the province, you just are picking it up in different areas, and it clearly moved in from Saskatchewan.
Mm-hmm. Is there a risk to people eating meat from these animals?
Possibly. We don't know. We haven't seen a case from CWD in humans. Having said that, the incubation periods for prion diseases in humans are long, 10 plus years. In research labs, there is some evidence of the possibility to infect humans, but again, we haven't seen a case. My recommendation is always that if people are eating deer, elk, moose, that they get their animals tested, and if they're positive, don't eat them.
The example I've heard, and tell me if this is correct, is that we need to remember when you talk about incubation periods being long, mad cow disease and the mad cow disaster that unfolded, that was a 10-year incubation, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so people wouldn't have known if you ate that meat. It would be like 10 years. Is there anything that can be done to stop the spread of this, especially given that you said that this is just, natural migration patterns of animals?
There's not a lot we can do because we don't have any treatments or cures. Vaccines are actively being developed, but we don't have anything that's going to be ready for use in at least the next 5 years or so. What has worked in some areas is aggressive culling of animals around in the areas where new positives are found, so that if the number of animals infected is fairly low, if you can reduce the number of animals, you can stop that animal-to-animal spread.
Maybe cut the chain, yeah.
Yeah.
Debbie McKenzie, thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
That's Debbie McKenzie, professor in the Department of Biological Sciences in the Centre for Prions and Protein Folding Diseases at the University of Alberta, talking about a chronic wasting disease. Let's get to what's happening in the news this morning with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, some staff allege the Manitoba Teachers Society has become toxic. The union has about 70 support and administrative workers at its Winnipeg headquarters, and some staff there have filed grievances. That's according to the Teamsters, the union for the Teachers Society workers. We're going to hear more about what's been going on there. And a Winnipeg man is happy city councillors are considering a traffic plan for his street. Tim Fennell's a founding member of a group called Calm Cambridge, and he's been calling for traffic calming measures on Cambridge Street for years. He says it has thousands more vehicles than it was meant to handle. We'll hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
We'll talk to Tim in the next hour. Also, it is the last day of I Love to Read month, and book lovers may have noticed that the price of books in Canada has gone up. We're going to talk to a CBC producer who tried to find out why. So her report's coming up. Plus, a conversation with someone about things that students should know before submitting university applications. The deadline for many University of Manitoba programs, for example, is tomorrow, so stay tuned. That's all still ahead. Right now, Winnipeg, mostly cloudy, minus 19. We're heading for a high of minus 7, so warmer weather, cloudier skies. Usually that's how it goes, and that'll happen today. We are going to be mostly cloudy in the city with light snow beginning early this morning. Speaking of snow, we do have that snowfall warning that extends across Flin Flon, Thompson, Lynn Lake, Gillam, and Shamattawa up north, and the amounts of 10 to 15 centimeters. And there's also a cold weather warning, an extreme cold warning for similar areas, Thompson, Lynn, Brochet, Tadouli, and Shamattawa. So Thompson, right now, minus 41, very different from the south here. Stay tuned. We've got World Report coming up next on CBC.
Today on The Current.
What I've learned is that for all our differences, what brings us together as Canadians is this land.
The filmmaker Deanne Whalen spent 6 years traveling across this country on the Trans-Canada Trail. She learned a lot about herself and our vast landscape, but also says her faith was restored in the niceness of Canadians. Coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The fate of Quebec's controversial secularism law could be determined today. The province's highest court, the Court of Appeal, will issue its ruling on the constitutionality of Bill 21. The 5-year-old law bans government employees in positions of authority from wearing religious symbols. Today's decision is the latest for the legislation that has seen years of court challenges. Sarah Levitt reports.
This legislation violates the rights of religious minorities.
Harney Civillingham is with the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, one of the several groups that's been challenging Bill 21 in court to argue it's discriminatory. In 2019, the Quebec government forced the law through using the notwithstanding clause. It meant teachers, judges, and other public servants aren't allowed to wear religious symbols, including the hijab, kippah, cross, or turban. The Superior Court decision upheld the law in 2021, with a few exceptions. That led both the government and the groups to appeal. The Legault government recently tabled a bill to renew the use of the notwithstanding clause for Bill 21 to shield its law from constitutional challenges.
Those lower judgments really lay the kind of textual terrain for what the Supreme Court will do.
Robert Leckie is the dean of McGill University's Faculty of Law. He says today's decision is important because it seems certain the case will go to the Supreme Court of Canada.
We've got a trial decision. We'll now have an appellate decision. These things build in a very important way the record that will reach the Supreme Court of Canada.
The decision from the Quebec Court of Appeal is expected this afternoon. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
We are expecting to hear more from Immigration Minister Mark Miller this hour. He is expected to talk about Canada's plan to reinstate visa requirements for Mexicans entering this country. Radio-Canada and CBC News have confirmed the change will take effect at 11:30 Eastern this morning. Mexico has already threatened to retaliate. Reaction so far has been mixed. CBC spoke to some Mexicans with ties to Canada at the Vancouver airport.
That's very upsetting for us. For our family, it means another step or another boundary, because now they will have to apply in order to come here to Canada and, well, visit their granddaughter. And
I think it's becoming necessary. It's a problem for the U.S. border because people are crossing illegally. So I think when rules are being broken like that, then having the restriction is necessary to put things in order.
Both the United States and Quebec Premier François Legault have been asking the federal government to bring back visa requirements. They argue it would help curb an increase in illegal crossings from Canada into the States. The Immigration and Refugee Board says more than 25,000 Mexicans applied for asylum in Canada last year. That makes Mexico the top source of asylum claims. France is one step closer to enshrining the right to abortion in its constitution. The country's Senate voted overwhelmingly in favor. Justice Minister Éric Dupond-Moretti says it is historic.
Ce vote est historique. Nous serons le premier pays au monde à inscrire dans la Constitution cette liberté pour les femmes de disposer de leur corps.
He says France will be the first country in the world to inscribe a woman's freedom over her body in the Constitution. Abortion has been legal in France since 1974, but after the U.S. Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade, there has been growing pressure in France to include it in the Constitution. The bill now goes to a joint session of the National Assembly and the Senate for another vote. That will happen next Monday. An Ontario woman says she lived through a nightmare. She spent 3 days at the bedside of a dying man. She thought he was her son. Days after his remains were cremated, she learned the man was not at all related to her. Dan Tekema picks up the story from there.
The same hairline, the long eyelashes. It just looked like Sean.
Heather Inslee hadn't seen her son in years. But when Ottawa's Montfort Hospital called in January to say Sean was there in critical condition, she rushed to his side.
He was laying in the bed with the ventilator, all hooked up, all wires.
Inslee says her son struggles with addiction, and they hadn't been in regular contact. But on the same day he was cremated, someone texted her, claiming to be him.
I was so numb, because I thought, oh my God, your funeral's tomorrow.
With the help of Ottawa police, she managed to track Sean down.
I thought, I'm so happy he's alive, but I just went through all that morning.
In a statement, Montfort confirmed a misidentification had occurred. A spokesperson says the hospital apologizes to both families, and it's reviewing what happened. The Ontario Hospital Association says incidents like this are incredibly rare.
Chills went down my spine.
Sean Cox says he didn't know about all the confusion, but it's been a big eye-opener.
I feel like I've been given a second chance.
Inslee doesn't know who she mourned in that hospital bed, but she has a message for his family.
We stayed right with him, just as though he was our own son.
She wants Montfort to come up with a better system for identifying patients to save others the pain she and her family have endured. Dan Takama, CBC News, Picton, Ontario.
With just over 2 weeks to go until Russia's presidential election, Vladimir Putin is delivering his annual State of the Nation address.
Необходимо укрепить группировки на западном стратегическом направлении, чтобы нейтрализовать угрозы, связанные с...
Among other things, Putin is warning that NATO risks nuclear war if the alliance sends troops into Ukraine. The threat follows France's assertion this week that such a move may be necessary to support Kyiv. Putin is also claiming widespread support from Russians in the Ukrainian conflict. On domestic issues, he's been promising changes in education, taxation, and investment in technology. Russians head to the polls mid-March. Putin is all but guaranteed to win. It is Budget Day in Alberta, the first since Danielle Smith was elected premier last spring. Despite high oil and gas royalties, Smith is expected to tighten the provincial belt. Aaron Collins has more on that.
In my view, our province has one last shot at getting this right.
Danielle Smith wants to get off the resource roller coaster. Alberta's premier making her pitch in a televised address last week.
It is time for our province to implement a long-term strategic financial plan.
Smith wants to save more cash from oil and gas revenues for the future, boosting Alberta's savings account to $400 billion by 2050. And how she'll actually do that is unclear, but today's provincial budget should provide some clues.
Growing the Heritage Fund has been a preoccupation for Alberta for a really long time.
But economist Kent Fellows says actually doing it isn't easy.
Building that fund means that we're not spending on other stuff. And so you look at infrastructure, you look at program spending, you look at taxes.
No spending cuts are likely in today's budget. No new taxes either. Plans to cut taxes and build a major hospital are being shelved. But political scientist Brendan Boyd says maintaining that fiscal restraint could be challenging as the next election gets closer.
The pressure to, spend money to, give things back to your communities, the people that support you, that type of thing, or potential voters becomes quite strong.
Alberta's government will introduce its budget this afternoon. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Today is February 29th, a day that comes round just once every 4 years. And if you are one of the millions of Canadians on a fixed annual salary, you're not being paid for this extra leap year day. As Philippe de Montigny reports, it could be costing you hundreds of dollars.
In the heart of Toronto's financial district, many who earn a yearly salary weren't too happy to find out they won't be getting paid for that extra day of work.
You still have your expenses for that day. I think we should be compensated. If I'm working, I want to be paid.
Some argue it's a give and take. Earning a salary comes with other benefits and more flexibility.
I'm not necessarily a 9-to-5 kind of gal, even if that's what my contract says.
It's a quarter of a day every 4 years, so that doesn't really move that bottom line for me a whole lot.
But for some, it can add up to hundreds of dollars. Crunching the latest numbers from Statistics Canada, the average salaried worker would be losing out on $351 for a typical 8-hour day. And with more than 6.5 million people earning a fixed annual salary, employers collectively save more than $2 billion.
We use the term wage theft.
Ella Bédard is a lawyer with the Workers' Action Center. She says unpaid leap days is part of a broader issue. Employers who don't pay overtime, public holidays, and even withhold employee benefits.
People are feeling it more because every dollar counts when the cost of living is as high as it is now.
Some contracts include pay for leap days, but it's still pretty uncommon. It's up to employers, and currently, no law forces them to adjust salaries for that extra day. Philippe de Montigny, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa, live in downtown Winnipeg on this unusual day that only comes up every 4 years. It is Leap Day. Thanks for joining us. You're on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Well, this hour on the show, coming up at 10 to 8, a Winnipeg man wants the city to tell drivers to hit the brakes and stop using his street as a thoroughfare. He's been fighting to get things slowed down on Cambridge for years. We're going to hear more from him as there's been a development now and a response from the city about what they're going to do there. In addition, this hour on the program, we're going to talk about books. This is the final day of I Love to Read month, but how much did you spend on books this month? One of our CBC producers says it feels like it's getting more expensive to be a reader, so she looked into it. We'll hear more about why book lovers in Canada might have noticed that the price of books has gone up. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells in our news center for other stories. Hi.
Good morning. A Winnipeg foster home provider that was giving cannabis to teens in care is now blasting the province for cutting ties with the company. In a memo to staff, Spirit Rising House says the system is fraught with denial and turning a blind eye to the trauma and real epidemic of addiction these kids face. However, the president of the Manitoba Foster Parent Association says giving kids cannabis is not harm reduction. We'll hear more fallout from this story. As well, allegations this morning of a toxic environment at the Manitoba Teachers Society. That's the union for Manitoba teachers. And the allegations have led to an external investigation as well as a number of employees taking leave from work. Our next news coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk is in with weather and traffic, starting with the forecast. Corey?
Minus 17 right now at the Forks, and it's only going to get warmer from there. I'm sure everyone's ready for a little bit more warm weather. Minus 7 is going to be the high today with some light snow here in Winnipeg. And then overnight it's going to dip down just to minus 9, partly cloudy. Then tomorrow, holy schmolies, we're warming up to 5 degrees. That's 5 degrees above zero.
Technical term for
Yes.
5 degrees is holy schmolies.
Yes, exactly. That's just basic meteorology. Sunny as well, so look out for that tomorrow. But up north, though, much different story right now. Extreme cold warning in effect, as well as a snowfall warning for Thompson, Nelson House, Split Lake, Lynn Lake, Leaf Rapids, Puckatawagan, Brochet, Dooley Lake, Gillum, and Shamattawa right now. That means right now temperatures in the minus 30s to 40s. And then with that wind chill, it's going to feel more like minus 45. You can also expect about 10 to 15 centimeters of snow today and through into Friday as well. I'll have a closer look at some of the regions later on this hour. But right now, Winnipeg, we are sitting at minus 17 at the Forks. Looking at your commute right now, been very straightforward so far. I did get a call from Jason, a cyclist, who says just Donald, just north of Confusion Corner there. It gets a little tricky because cyclists, technically you're entitled to be on the road, but it's very tight and very slippery right around that corner there. And he actually suggests just pop up onto the sidewalk if you are in there because there's a lot of the cars kind of going a little bit, getting a little bit close and kind of catching off guard. And it's very slippery. So do look out for that. Thanks for that call, Jason. If you see anything else going on out there on the roads, highways, bike lanes, sidewalks, give me a call. I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
I think we should announce our winner from yesterday. I've got all the deets here.
Let's do it.
So yesterday we had, can you sing it with me?
Oh,
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Bill. I just picture it's like I just picture that the teacher rolling in that TV stand into the classroom every time, and all the kids going Bill, because you just
Did that
know
happen in your class?
Oh yeah, oh for sure. You know, it's like oh, we're watching it's a substitute teacher science class. We know Bill Nye's coming on the TV.
I'm more of the Suzuki generation, and he had a different lower key, different sort of engagement with science than Bill.
Yeah,
Bill's fun. A lot of people want to go see his live show, which is this weekend in Winnipeg, which is what we're talking about. Bill has had a 6-part series that aired years ago called The End Is Nigh, actually shot in Montreal. But he's put a live show together, a stage show based on that series, looking at climate change. And so he is in Winnipeg on Sunday. And yesterday we asked you about your favorite science experiments for a chance to go see Bill. And we took all of your answers, some of which we might still sprinkle through the show today. But we randomly chose a winner. And so Corey McDougall, you are are going to see
Bill.
So here's what
Science
Corey
rules.
wrote in. Science rule. Is that one of his catchphrases? It is, right?
Maybe. I actually got to double check that. Maybe I was just saying it.
Strangely, around all of this, last night on television, randomly, I was watching Weird Science.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Don't judge me.
You got the science bug.
Or maybe the bad 80s movie bug. But Corey McDougall, congratulations. You're going to see Bill Nye on Sunday. Corey wrote in that building bottle rockets was the best science project for young boys. So that's what we plan to do with my 10-year-old, Corey writes. So have fun with that. And I sure hope you're taking your 10-year-old potentially as your second to see Bill Nye because you've won a pair of tickets. We will contact you after the show. Well, University of Manitoba applications for new students are due tomorrow. So if you are planning on submitting an application, but you feel a bit overwhelmed, don't worry. Our next guest is here to help us with advice this morning. Lisa Kachulek-Bobby is an Associate Registrar and Director of Student Recruitment at the University of Manitoba, and she joins us via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So which specific applications are due tomorrow for families leaning into the radio this morning?
Absolutely. So the majority of our what we call direct entry applications are due tomorrow. So those are for those students who are currently in grade 12 and are looking to go to university next year. The vast majority of them are due tomorrow. So the good news is we have a leap year. So like you said, we've got that extra day this year before our March 1st deadline. And it's actually a really easy process. So the other good news is we do have another program that's available after that date. So if you can't get it in time, there's still some options out there for you.
One of the programs that has an application due at a later date is U1, University One. Can we elaborate a little bit on that one?
Yeah, University One's a really great option. And in fact, of course, you can apply today for tomorrow's deadline, which I would encourage because those students who do apply by our March 1st deadline are also automatically considered for scholarships. So it really is a good time to apply. But we do recognize that some students are really, not sure exactly what they want to take, or perhaps they do need that little bit of extra time to figure out exactly, if university is right for them. So University One is our first year flexible program for any student. And in fact, actually about 48% of new high school students do start in University One. There's a bit of a common misconception that it's a required course or that it adds extra time or extra money, and that's just not the case. It's really that first flexible year where you can take classes from any faculty and then make your decision in year two.
How are you guys doing with enrollment at U of M? Obviously, during the pandemic, we had there were challenges we reported on with enrollment, and a lot of people sort of adjusting and figuring out in-person learning versus Zoom learning. So how are the enrollment numbers, looking? Are you anticipating applications at a different level this year?
It's really hard for us to say because until we get that March 1st deadline under our belt, we get the vast majority definitely come in within the month of February. But it's this last September intake was one of our biggest yet. So we were back up over the 30,000 student mark. I'm not sure what next year will bring quite yet, a little early to say, but applications are tracking well, which is good news.
What are some of the common things that people get stressed or anxious about when they're submitting post-secondary applications that you hear?
Well, you know what? It's funny because when they actually get through the application, they realize how simple it is. But, when you don't know what something is or it's the unknown, it obviously is a little bit scary. And I think one of the things that students really trick themselves up on is overthinking it a bit too much. And what I mean by that is really it's going to take you about 20 to 30 minutes to complete the application. And there is one section that tends to be a little bit of a nerve-wracking sort of section for students, which we call our self-reported grades. So students are really worried about this because they don't quite know what to do. So I'm going to give you the quick and easy way to explain it. And like I say to all students, just don't overthink it. We're actually looking for what you think your grades are going to be for your top 5 academic subjects. So I always say to students, you basically know how you did in, for example, grade 11 biology. You know how you're tracking this year. So make your best estimated guess. If that changes, you don't have to come back and tell us. This is just your guess at this point of time for us to give you a preliminary assessment. At the end of the day, we really give you an admission offer once we get grades from your schools. So this is just a preliminary thing. So please don't overthink it. Get that application in, and it's really quite easy for you.
How long should people typically wait to hear back? What should they be prepared for there?
Yeah, so depends, of course, on the program they apply to, whether it's a competitive program or if it's accepted at the minimum requirement. But typically, you won't hear back from the University for Manitoba students until May and sometimes into June. So it will depend on what program that is. Something like Arts Sciences University 1, if you meet that minimum requirement, you're going to get into the University of Manitoba. So those decisions come out a little bit quicker than some of our other more competitive programs, which we do have to do it at a cutoff. So we'll have to wait and see how all of the grades come in and what the competitive pool looks like, and then decisions can be made. So the good news is that the grades come directly from your schools if you apply by the March 1st deadline, which is also another benefit of applying by tomorrow. All you have to do is fill out that demographic information, and we will get your grades automatically transferred for your midterm second semester grades. So it's a really easy, seamless process.
Do you talk about applying for jobs, and there's always advice about how to stand out. Is there a way that a student can make their application stand out, or is that something you think people should think about?
It's at the University of Manitoba, what we're looking for is really those academic results for admission purposes. So we always say to students, definitely get involved. And especially when you become a University of Manitoba student, we want you to get involved. And research shows that students who do get involved actually do academically better. But from the admissions standpoint, we really are looking at those grade 12 academic results to determine admission.
What are some of the more competitive programs this year?
Well, they tend to be, and I always say to students, never ever go by last year's results because every year can be really different, but they tend to be interdisciplinary health sciences is one of our most popular programs, or I should say, not necessarily popular, but certainly most competitive. Engineering can sometimes be very competitive, as well as Asper School of Business and kinesiology can sometimes also be quite competitive. Again, it really depends on year to year. It depends on the applicant pool. So I always say to students, just get the application into the program you're interested in. And the best news is if you don't meet the academic cutoff, we'll automatically consider you for University 1. So you don't need to make a second application just in case. University 1 is always the backup plan.
All right, Lisa, thank you very much for this. I appreciate it. And getting everybody thinking about this today on the final day. I appreciate having you on CBC. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care.
You too. That's Lisa Kachulek-Bobby. She's an associate registrar and director of student recruitment over the University of Manitoba. So today, the last day to be applying. It is 7:23 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the CBC Listen app. We've got morning sports coming up in a couple minutes here. It's -19 in the city of Winnipeg right now. Our high is -7. So just enough time to slide in a tune. This is Scenic Route to Alaska and call it a coincidence.
Streetlights always burn out when I'm walking underneath. Maybe that's just your funny way of saying hi to me. The warm wind wraps around me and the birds sing in my ears. Call it a coincidence, or maybe you are here. It's better than being alone, 'cause it's all just a rolling of the dice, the consequence of life. You didn't say goodbye, you said I'll see you down the line.
call it a coincidence by Edmonton band Scenic Route to Alaska on CBC. Time right now, 7:25 a.m., and we're moving along to morning sports. Scott Regehr joins us now. Hello to you.
Being from the Yukon, I can highly recommend going through Alaska. Every route is scenic, especially to Haines on the coast, where you have the icebergs in the Pacific there, and halibut. Oh, the halibut fishing. Anyway, thank you. You got me thinking of the north again.
No, I'm thinking about that. I had a friend's family always went on those Alaskan cruises, and just the photos they would bring back were amazing.
Yeah, incredible.
Amazing. Are you wearing your fancy hat today? Are you going to be a beatnik?
No, I was ostracized by my boys for wearing that hat.
Your kids? They didn't like
they didn't
it?
know the word affected, but they were trying to come up with it. I could tell. So I said, no, okay, bye-bye, Tukey.
All right. Well, the hatless Scott Regehr with sports. Let's start with soccer. Canada continues to roll at the Gold Cup.
Yeah, 3 wins and 3 tries now, Marcy, for Canada after a 3-0 win against Costa Rica yesterday. Leading the way with a couple of goals, both on headers off of set pieces, Shalina Zadorsky. Pretty impressive when you consider what she's been through, the defender. Zadorsky has contracted COVID twice in the past 2 years, and testing also revealed she suffers from celiac disease, a digestive disorder that prevents your body from taking in nutrients. So Zadorsky says for months she suffered not just from extreme fatigue, but as she puts it, from every other sick symptom you can find. So if her teammates were celebrating a little more than usual after her goals last night, that's probably why. Following the win, the Kitchener, Ontario native Zadorsky had this to say.
Taking this momentum forward is big for us. So, yeah, it's just good that we scored so many goals and we kept clean sheets. That's the main thing. Now it's group stage done and we can move forward with that momentum.
So the momentum will be on display in the quarterfinals where Canada will play Costa Rica again. The Canadians might have faced Puerto Rico, Marcy, since they had the same number of points, but a tiebreaker determined otherwise. Puerto Rico and Costa Rica had not just the same number of points, but the same goal differential and the same number of yellow cards received, and so it went to a simple drawing of lots in the end. The quarterfinal between Canada and Costa Rica goes on Saturday, where the winner will likely face anyway, the high-powered U.S. in the next round.
Let's go to hockey and a memorable night in a couple of leagues, actually.
Yeah, in the NHL, where the world's best player, as they say, got off the schneid. Having not scored in 10 contests, Connor McDavid had the overtime winner for Edmonton against St. Louis. The Oilers, the only Canadian team in action last night, while in the Professional Women's Hockey League, Ottawa can say the same. And like the Oilers, Ottawa won, in their case, over New York, so they now move into 5th place in the standings. Some fascinating announcements, Marcy, by the PWHL yesterday. Here's Commissioner Jana Hefford.
As we continue to grow and be creative in how we build this league, this is a really important part for us, is that we are willing to do things a little bit differently and be innovative in how we do things. So we are implementing a rule where the number 1 team after the regular season will have the opportunity to choose either number 3 or number 4 as their first round opponent.
So if the season ended today, league leaders Montreal could choose to play either 3rd place Toronto or 4th place Boston in the playoffs. I love this. Locker room fodder left, right, and center. But this is just the latest innovative approach being taken by the league, Marcy. Another is the so-called gold plan. That will see to the team eliminated from the playoffs that accrues the greatest number of points after they're eliminated receive the first overall draft pick. This disincentivizes tanking. That's a stroke of genius from where I sit. Something the NHL would do well to adopt. Imagine men learning from women. Also, the Jets, they're back in action tonight. They play in Dallas against the Stars. A win for the Jets. We'll see them atop the Central Division. Puck drop at 7 o'clock.
Now, before you go this morning, briefly back to soccer here, because things are not going well for a superstar in Saudi Arabia.
Cristiano Ronaldo suspended for 1 match for making an alleged offensive gesture during a game for his team in the Saudi League. Footage on social media appears to show him cupping his ear and repeatedly thrusting his hand forward near his pelvis, seemingly aimed at rival fans. Ronaldo, considered by many footy's best player of all time alongside Lionel Messi. I'm trying to envision having to tell this exact story with Messi instead of Ronaldo. Somehow I can't.
Wonder why. Why? I don't know. There's no history there of behavioral things, are there?
No.
All right, we're digressing. Thank you.
You bet.
That's Scott Regehr with Morning Sports. Well, the snow's now started in downtown Winnipeg. Be careful. It could be a little bit icy on the streets, whether you're walking or if you're at those intersections that are a bit icy at the corners. 788-3093 if you need us in traffic. Coming up after the news, book lovers may notice that the price of books in Canada has gone up. We're going to talk to a CBC producer about it. But right now, your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. Minus 17 right now. And on this leap day, our temperature is going to take a leap all the way up to minus 7 in Winnipeg this afternoon. The foster home
a year and a
provider
half
that was
ago.
giving cannabis
And this
to
week,
at-risk
jurors heard
youth
from
in
the
their
officer
care
whose actions
is
ended
blasting the
that
province
police
for cutting
chase.
ties with them
Dan
instead of
Zakreski
finding
has
a
the
way to move
details.
forward.
Heidi Marshall joined the chase when Sanderson crossed onto Highway 11 and headed south towards Saskatoon. He was driving in the wrong lane into oncoming traffic. Over a 10-kilometer stretch, he forced 40 vehicles into the ditch and onto the shoulder. Then he abruptly crossed the median into the correct lane. And that's when Heidi Marshall made her move. She managed to get close enough to deliberately hit the back corner of Miles Sanderson's truck, sending it into a spin. Now, experts say this so-called pit maneuver is a risky and uncertain proposition at 80 kilometers an hour. Heidi Marshall was going twice that speed and using a technique she had never been trained to use before. Saskatoon police reviewed the circumstances of the chase. They had nothing but praise for Marshall. Miles Sanderson died of a cocaine overdose shortly after RCMP pulled him from the stolen truck. Dan Zakreski, CBC News, Saskatoon.
At 7:32 in Regina, it is currently mostly cloudy, minus 11 degrees, the wind chill, minus 22. Saskatoon, cloudy, minus 14, the wind chill, minus 25. This is CBC News. A former Saskatoon teacher says extra supports for students with complex needs is desperately needed. Julianne Bell used to teach at John Dolan, a school that helps students with physical and cognitive disabilities. When she was there, Bell says she was expected to change diapers and to lift students. And it caused her stress and anxiety, so she left the profession.
I feel like there's no future for teachers in Saskatchewan. Out of my closest friends who are teachers, the majority of them have left the teaching profession or taken an extended break. And these are all extremely passionate, wonderful.
Their workplace isn't safe. Teamsters is the union representing the 70 workers. It says grievances concerning alleged violations of the collective agreement and a toxic work environment are going to arbitration, but wouldn't elaborate further. People with knowledge of what's happening at MTS told CBC News at least 10 employees have taken a leave off work. Teamsters conducted a survey last year in which 57% of respondents said they considered their workplace psychologically unsafe. MTS subsequently conducted an external investigation. It says it can't reveal its findings, but is taking the complaints seriously. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The mother of a woman killed by a drunk driver says she is happy a four-way stop is going in at the intersection. Jordan Reimer died in 2022 after being hit at the corner of Kildare Avenue and Bond Street. City officials recently approved a four-way stop at that intersection. Karen Reimer is Jordan's mother.
If Jordan had had the chance to stop and look and see that truck barreling down at over 100 kilometers an hour, I believe she would not have entered the intersection. It would have saved her life.
Transcona Councillor Russ Wyatt has pushed for more traffic calming measures along Kildare, including roundabouts at 7 intersections. The Public Works Committee will vote on whether to fund a traffic safety program at Kildare at a special budget meeting starting on Friday. Staff at a Winnipeg nonprofit are working overtime to help a growing number of asylum seekers file refugee claims. Healthy Muslim Families says the number of people asking them for help has tripled in the last few months. Nazum Siddiqa is a facilitator at the organization.
They don't have much information, so they don't remember a lot of dates.
a lot of information. They don't have any evidence because they were going through the persecution, the torture, the detention and everything.
The organization says most people they help come from south of the border, but they say there's also a jump in claimants coming from other provinces, believing the process will be faster here. A Lake Winnipeg First Nation says it wants to get notified right away when a sewage leak threatens their waterways. A massive spill in South Winnipeg dumped more than 230 million litres of raw sewage into the Red River earlier this month. The leak has now been fixed, but communities north of Winnipeg say they're upset the city didn't reach out to them when it happened. Broken Head Ojibwe Chief Gordon Bluesky met with Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham yesterday.
I'm still, I guess, in shock a little bit how the whole scenario unfolded, and that it came to a point to where we had to be notified via the news. But I still am concerned about who's monitoring compliance, who's in charge of enforcement.
Bluesky says the city promised to make changes so other affected communities are notified about future spills. You can find more on these stories as well as other news as it happens. Just head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, speaking of the website, I want to briefly say here that you can read the story online about the Louis Riel School Division. This started moving yesterday. They are proposing a 7.5% tax hike in the division. They say that would pay for universal full-day kindergarten and allow them to expand it. So we are going to talk to a trustee after 8 o'clock about this. But if you want to weigh in on that, you can let us know what you think. 788-3205 is our listener line. So if you're a family in the Louis Riel School Division, and you're a taxpayer in that division, what do you think of this proposed 7.5% hike? This, of course, on the heels of a bigger city conversation just a few years after Manitoba's largest school division, Winnipeg School Division, said full-time kindergarten in their experience that ran for 8 years did not have benefits on student learning and academic performance that were expected. So we have two divisions making different decisions, but if you're a taxpayer in Louis Riel, call us, 788-3205. Corey Funk is here now with weather and traffic.
Minus 17 right now in Winnipeg. It's going to get much, much warmer, at least here down south as the day goes on. High of minus 7 today with some light snow. You can already see some snow out there right now falling down on the city. Going to cool down to minus 9 overnight and then warm up to plus 5 tomorrow and be mainly sunny. Up north, a much different story this morning. You have both a snowfall and an extreme cold warning for you this morning in areas stretching from, snowfall warning applies to Flin Flon, Cranberry Portage, Snow Lake, Thompson, Nelson, Split Lake, Puckatawagan, and Gillam and Shamattawa. You can expect to see about 10 to 15 centimeters of snow over today and through into Friday. An extreme cold in the Thompson, Nelson, Split Lake, Puckatawagan, Brochades, Dooley Lake, Gillam, and Shamattawa area as well. That's looking at temperatures in the minus 30s, even minus 40s as well. With that wind chills could feel more like minus 45. So very, very cold up north and very, very snowy as well today. Looking at your other regions right now, Thompson, you are at minus 39, heading for a high of minus 19 today. It will be sunny for you. Brandon, minus 14, heading for a high of minus 3 with some light snow today. Dauphin, minus 18, heading for a high of minus 10 with some light snow as well. Here in Winnipeg, we're sitting at minus 17. Traffic commute been pretty straightforward, pretty quiet so far. But if it's not quiet or straightforward for you, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. I will let folks know what you're seeing. That number 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, today is Leap Day, February 29th, but it is also the last day of I Love to Read month. And when you think of expensive hobbies, you probably don't think about reading. You probably think photography, golf, maybe art. But reading, if you want to own the books, can be an expensive hobby, especially in Canada. Many readers have found that the prices of books have gone up in the last little while. And CBC producer Kalkadan Mulugeta spoke to readers, a publisher, and a local bookstore about why this is happening and what people can do to save money. And she popped into the studio to tell us about it. Good morning.
Good morning.
So why was this something, first of all, that you wanted to explore?
Yeah, so I would say 8 years ago, I was a super avid reader in middle school and elementary school. And then I kind of got out of it high school, college time. And I noticed recently when I got back into it that the prices of books had gone up, especially in bookstores. And things like a paperback would cost around $25 for one, which is pretty insane. And I didn't know if that was normal or not. And so I went onto social media to see what other people were paying for their books and noticed that, yeah, there was a large difference in, at least from my perspective, what U.S. Readers were paying versus Canadian. And so I spoke with a reader whose name is Lauren Hauer, and she is a book talker, which is someone who talks about books on TikTok. And she talked about how she felt the same way.
Sometimes people don't necessarily disclose like an actual dollar amount that they've spent on books, but they'll show you how many they've got, and they'll be like 20 books. And I'm like, oh my God, I just assume that costs so much money, because in Canada, buying 20 books would be like $1,000 worth of books.
So it's interesting. She's saying people showing you. That's, I guess, when people are on socials literally showing off their haul of books.
Yeah.
Right? How much are people typically paying for books in Canada?
Yeah, so it definitely depends on the bookstore you go to. But for me, these books that I have were around $64.
Okay, we should tell the radio audience here how many books are in front of you.
So I have 3 books. One is a fantasy, one is a mystery, and one is a nonfiction. These 3 books that I have were around $64 for all of them.
Wow. So they're not, just so people know, how many pages in that first book you've got, a stack of 3 there?
356 pages.
Okay, so pretty standard novel-sized books. How much did you say?
$64.
Wow. What about Lauren Hauer? What did she share with you?
Yeah, Lauren explained how much she paid for her latest book haul last month.
Oh my gosh, sometimes I think the last time I bought books, this was like 3 weeks ago, and I think it was about $200. And that was for, I think, 6 books. And a lot of those weren't hardcover. I think maybe one of them was. So those are for paperbacks. Yeah, it was crazy.
Now, it used to be, at least, that Canadian prices on the back of books were a lot more expensive than the listed U.S. price. You know, you could see it there. Mm-hmm. Is that still the case?
Yeah, so I did some looking into it, and it's actually not that black and white. It depends on whether the book was published here in Canada, whether or not it's popular right now, sometimes the genre. But I did some comparison online, and I actually found that when you consider the exchange rate, there isn't a lot of difference between Canadian and U.S. pricing. But I spoke with a U.S. book talker. Her name is Zoe Jackson, and she's a book talker from Minneapolis, and said she's feeling the price crunch too, and mostly buys paperbacks.
I personally prefer paperbacks, like both because I feel like they're easier to read, but like also, of course, because they're like half the price. I mean, you know, usually they're like $16 or like $17, which I mean isn't nothing, of course, but you know, it's much more affordable than buying hardcover books.
Jackson also said she noticed a difference between the way young adult books are priced versus other genres, which is typically higher. And she says that may be because publishers have noticed adults reading YA or young adult novels. She also worries that may be pricing kids out of buying their own books.
Can an actual kid buy a book with their own money in high school now? You know, it's like, I think it's getting more like unaffordable, which really sucks. I don't know.
So we mentioned in the introduction, Calcadan, that you spoke to a number of different people. What do publishers have to say about the price of books?
Yeah, well, according to Mel Marginet, who is a publisher of the Manitoba-based Great Plains Press, the price of books is a complex economic issue, and it can even cost more for Canadians to buy books printed in Canada.
The unfortunate thing with Canada is we just have so many multinationals here that, you know, we're printing our books in Canada and kind of paying those prices, but we don't have the same population as in the U.S. So in terms of like a cost per item, we're printing fewer books of each print run, and therefore the cost for each of the books is much higher. You know, in the U.S., they can just do much larger print runs just because they have a much bigger population.
What about those that sell the books? You talked to an owner of a small local bookstore. What did she tell you about pricing?
Yeah, so I spoke with Megan Malcolm, the owner of Willow Press bookstore, and they said the prices are predetermined by publishers and distributors, and they have seen those prices get higher recently as well.
I have to check when I'm putting them on the shelf if the price is actually higher than the last time we ordered it. It has been happening lately, and I think that's cost of printing. I mean, just in general, inflation and things like that. But the cost of printing is a really expensive thing for creating books. And I imagine that is getting more expensive right now.
Megan said they've been hearing from customers that people have been having trouble making decisions between affording things like groceries and essential items and things they enjoy, like books.
I'm finding customers talking about those choices a lot, and I mean, I'm feeling the weight of that too. So I definitely understand. And it's tricky because I run a store that, like, you don't need a new book, but you want a new book. So it's a hard balance because these things that we really value in our own lives and, you know, businesses that we want to keep existing, it's hard to keep supporting them when, the cost of things is just so high.
Obviously, we're going to start talking about the library then. I'm guessing that came up while you were doing the story as well.
Yes, a lot of people, Marcy, that I spoke with mentioned going to the library, doing things like reading audiobooks or using e-readers because that's cheaper. Jessica Tays, for example, is a local reader I spoke with that reads most of her books electronically with a Kobo. She also says borrowing books from people you know is a great way to not worry about the money aspect.
With my e-reader, like, if I really like a book, then I go out and buy it to, like, own so I could share with other people and, like, support the author as well. Sharing books is a really nice way to keep costs down and also share the experience. You can, like, talk about it with other people.
Lauren Hauer also says audiobooks are a great option, not only for the price.
I don't know, I like being able to, like, cook and listen to an audiobook. I don't always want to be listening to music, or if I'm driving somewhere, it's so nice to just put on an audiobook.
So what about you before you go this morning with your stack of expensive books? Have you been doing things sort of differently to try to, be mindful of cost?
Yeah, so what I've been doing is buying ebooks more often, and it's a great way to buy books within my budget. One surprising thing I learned from a local author is that authors actually make more money from ebooks sometimes than traditional paperbacks or hardcovers that you buy from a bookstore. So if you're interested in reading and supporting authors, ebooks might be a great option for you.
I didn't know that either. Thank you for coming in, Calcadan. Appreciate the report.
Thank you.
That was our report about what's happening with the prices of books. So Calcadan Mulugeta, one of our producers here at CBC Radio, if you've noticed something similar, I'd love to hear your experience. It was interesting when she was in studio with that stack of 3 books, and then she said $63. It kind of makes you stop and go, wow, if you're an avid reader, it's a lot of money. So if you want to write to us, if you want to write to Calcadan for any follows on her stories, 788-3205.
Hi, I'm Paul Havershrud, host of The Cost of Living, a national business show that looks at everything the world of money touches, which, admittedly, is a lot of stuff.
The Cost of Living. Go beyond the facts and figures and discover the compelling business stories that affect the day-to-day lives of Canadians right across the country. Economics, business, and you. The Cost of Living with host Paul Havershrud. Available now on CBC Listen.
It is 13 minutes to 8 o'clock. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to 89.3 FM's Information Radio today. Minus 19 in the city of Winnipeg, snowing, and some real flurries out there this morning. Really gray days, so not as pretty as yesterday's bright blue sky, but we're going to be warmer today. A high of minus 7 is what we're expecting. After 8 o'clock on the show, we are going to hear from a family who pays taxes in Louis-Riel School Division, school taxes, that is. We're also going to hear from a trustee there about the proposed 7.5% tax hike there. And because it is Leap Day, February 29th, we're going to talk to someone who technically today is 17. So we'll say happy birthday to our guest who is actually 68 years old about what it's like to be born on Leap Day. Up next, though, Tim Fennell is with us. You might have heard his name in the news this morning. He's been asking drivers to stop using his street as a thoroughfare. He lives on Cambridge Street between Corden and Academy in Winnipeg, and he started a group called Calm Cambridge, which monitors and advocates for slower speed on the River Heights Street. So last May, he was with us here on Information Radio, and at that point, he counted more than 4,000 vehicles driving by his house in a 24-hour period. And he did that by creating his own counting machine, hoping the city would use the data to do something about the traffic. Now, he has since used it to count thousands more cars, including one day this past September when more than 4,600 cars went by in a day. Well, now a motion is making its way to City Hall that would ask Public Works to come up with a traffic plan for Cambridge Street. And so Tim is back on the show and in studio with us to update it and give us some reaction. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So how do you feel about the city now looking, at coming up with a plan for Cambridge?
Well, I'm quite pleased that there's a plan in the works, or at least a plan to be reviewed by council eventually. There's John Orlico has submitted on our behalf a number of items that I think we're going to be reviewed by Public Works, and Public Works will submit a proposal, hopefully, that aligns with a lot of the things that we are hoping need to be done, and hopefully that'll get approved.
How have things changed since we first started talking about this, and since you first started, advocating for the changes? Because now, are there more cyclists in the mix, or tell me a little bit about some of the shifts you've seen?
Well, we continue to see traffic that is, we've heard it described as off the charts, especially for a narrow residential roadway. I would say the trends have continued, especially even on evenings where there's a Jets game. You can see quite a large increase of traffic at the end of the Jets game, for example. So the traffic's continued, and it's clearly not local traffic. These are people commuting from the downtown area or West Broadway or across the city who are going to the neighborhoods south of River Heights.
Even local traffic, I'm thinking about, if people don't know this part of Winnipeg, like Grant Park Mall and a whole bunch of businesses would be like sort of on one end of Cambridge, which could connect you through Corden. If you don't want to take Stafford, you're taking Cambridge.
Yeah, and in the last couple summers, there's been work done on Stafford. We've been told by our city councillor that should help to alleviate some of the stress on the street, and I think that's part of what has made it possible to say, okay, well, it's time to do something about Cambridge Street because we can't continue to use it as an arterial route.
What are some of the more concerning things that you've seen because of the increased traffic?
Well, I actually requested from MPI that they provide some data about the collisions on our street. And when I spoke to my contact there at MPI, who was reviewing the data provided by their data team, she was quite surprised at just the sheer volume of collisions that have been happening. One year, there were 30 collisions just between Corridon and Wellington Crescent. In the last recent years, there have been a few collisions that involved cyclists, and one in the last decade that involved a pedestrian in that area. So that's extremely high for a residential street. That's just over 7 meters wide, and she said it was unusual.
What are you hoping that the city might consider? Because obviously we've had, in that River Heights neighborhood, there have been some efforts made on other streets. We were talking off mic about Grosvenor and the calming circles. Is that what you're hoping for there? Or what do you think would work?
Well, ultimately, I think a speed reduction would help. What we're seeing a lot in River Heights is that a lot of the streets are used as through streets for people that don't necessarily have a destination or are starting their trip in River Heights. They're driving through River Heights, and they're doing so because the speed limit is 50. It's just as easy to drive through, or if not easier, to take Cambridge, for example, than it is to take Stafford right now.
What speed would you be looking for?
Well, ideally down to 30. And I know there are a number of pilots going on across the city. There's, I think, one wrapped up this summer, testing speed reductions. There's a Greenway pilot right now, and Warsaw, which is adjacent to Cambridge Street, is one of those streets that had a reduced speed limit. And I would say, given that Cambridge Street is on the bike map as one of the bike routes, and the north end of Cambridge Street is actually marked as a greenway on the bike route map, I think it's reasonable to say, hey, we should examine the speed limit here, given that it's a priority route for cyclists, and also a route that a lot of students take to school in the mornings.
What's the reaction been from, your neighbors? You obviously talked to them about this development, that the city is now looking at this. Your numbers have been sent to your councillor. Obviously, they're looking at your data and they're respecting and following through. What's the buzz in the neighborhood?
Well, there's, specifically on Cambridge Street, I mean, we've handed out Calm Cambridge signs along the street and asked people to post them in their windows. A lot of people have done that. I would say the majority of them have in the sections where we handed them out. It was funny, during the election in the fall, the provincial election, I noticed people on social media sort of joking that if the election was for street calming, the please slow down sign would win the vote in River Heights. So I think there
tongue
is
in cheek, but speaks to people that are actually engaged in your advocacy.
Yeah, and of course, Mike Mraz is ultimately won over the please slow down signs, but we think that, our local councillors should be supporting this, and I think given that the Road Safety Strategic Action Plan that was approved unanimously, actually, by council back in 2022, supports a lot of these ideas that we should be proactive about roadway safety, particularly where we have data to show that there is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't have to wait multiple years for a community-wide plan to roll out where they study year after year to see what will work and what won't. There are some things that can be done in the interim, and that's what we've recommended to our councillor.
What will you do between now and when this plan is potentially put into action?
I'm hoping the plan doesn't take very long, at least for some of the interim things. Again, we're asking all of, anyone who supports this idea, or cyclists who support, calming of roadways. I know there are a lot of cyclists online who have really voiced or mirrored our sentiment about the concerns we have of cyclists using our roadway. I think anyone who agrees with this sentiment should contact their city councillors and voice their support.
Thank you very much for being in studio and telling us about your concerns about Cambridge this morning. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
That's Tim Fennell. He's a founding member of the group Calm Cambridge. So if council passes this motion later this month, by the way, Public Works would have 120 days then to report on an interim short-term and long-term management plan for Cambridge Street. So we'll have more analysis to come of this. But please, if you want to learn more information about the groups involved, calmcambridge.ca is a website that you can check out. And you can also weigh in on other areas of the city. Are you listening to Tim talk about his neighborhood and thinking, we should start that up here because I'm looking out the window and worried about the traffic on my street? As always, you can reach out to us at CBC if you want to share your story. Speaking of which, it's 3 minutes to 8 o'clock, and I've been watching Corey really busy behind the glass because he's connected with a family in Louisville School Division, and they do not have children in kindergarten age anymore. So we talked to them about weighing in on the tax increase that's being proposed in that division, as all families will be having to pay that. Part of what they're saying, if it goes through, about the 7.5% tax hike that's proposed, is that it would pay for universal full-day kindergarten. So that's why I framed that in that way, to say this is a family that's had their kids go through kindergarten. So we're going to hear that perspective, and then we're also going to talk to a trustee. So that's coming up after 8 o'clock on the show. Right now, 3 minutes to, Heather Wells joins us with news headlines.
Good morning. Some staff allege the Manitoba Teacher Society has become toxic. The Union for Teachers has about 70 support administrative workers at its Winnipeg headquarters. Some staff have filed grievances. Sources telling CBC News at least 10 workers have taken a leave from work. So we'll hear that story coming up. And a Winnipeg nonprofit says the number of people asking them for help with asylum applications has tripled in recent months. Healthy Muslim Families says asylum seekers now have to wait up to 4 weeks just to get an appointment. Shelter operators have told CBC News asylum seekers are putting extra pressure on the system. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather Wells. In the forecast today, we're expecting a high of -7, and we're going to have a cloudy day. That snow is, flurries coming down pretty heavy this morning in the city. It's -17 currently in Winnipeg, and winds will be southeast at 30 for us today. There is an extreme cold warning for up north, as well as a snowfall warning around Flin Flon, Thompson, and Lynn Lake. Coming up, we're going to say happy birthday to a leap year baby born on this day. What's that like?
Five perceptive panelists, 5 blockbuster books, 4 days of smart and sassy deliberation and debate, but there can only be one winner, the best book to carry us forward. Hi, I'm Ali Hassan, and I'm hosting Canada's favorite book battle, Canada Reads 2024. One book to carry us forward. Starts Monday on CBC Radio 1, CBC Listen, and CBC Gem. For more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
The filmmaker Deanne Whalen spent 6 years traveling across this country on the Trans-Canada Trail. She learned a lot about herself and our vast landscape, but also says her faith was restored in the niceness of Canadians. Coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Health Minister Mark Holland is expected to table the bill paving the way for national pharmacare today. It is an essential part of the supply and confidence agreement between the Liberals and the NDP. And it comes a day before a deadline put in place by the New Democrats to table the bill. Janice McGregor is on the story from Ottawa for us. And Janice, what are we expecting this bill to look like?
Marcia, the big win NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was celebrating last weekend is that the system today's legislation is expected to lay out is a universal one, not a stopgap program covering only low-income vulnerable groups like the dental care scheme that these two parties collaborated on earlier, backstopping only people who don't have plans already. This is expected to be a single-payer plan to cover everyone, but it wouldn't cover every drug, at least not initially. Something the Parliamentary Budget Officer estimated last fall would cost governments over $11 billion. That kind of money isn't coming in this spring's budget. Instead, they're starting with two large categories of drugs. Prescriptions for the roughly 4 million diabetics in Canada will now be covered, as will medications for millions of others at risk of diabetes. And the Liberals are poised to finally keep their 2019 election promise to cover sexual and reproductive health medications, not only meeting the contraception needs of millions, but perhaps setting up a useful political wedge with social conservatives, because the morning after pill, for example, could be covered under that category. We'll see today if the government gives us a budget preview, estimates how much starting with just these two categories of drugs will cost initially. But the NDP's hope is that this is only the beginning, more drugs to come as future budgets allow.
But healthcare is provincial jurisdiction. Is there consensus among the provinces on this bill?
No. British Columbia and Manitoba both have provincial NDP governments, and they're supportive. They're likely to be the first movers here to sign on. But even without seeing the bill, Alberta and Quebec have said no thank you, something New Democrat Alexandre Boulris yesterday said would be a mistake.
25% of people in Canada are not taking the medication they need for their own health. It's incredible. And the collective cost of this is unmanageable. So, if Danielle Smith and François Legault want to take that road, they will have to explain to their own citizens.
Other provinces remain in wait-and-see mode. As with the childcare deals, getting buy-in across the board might come down to how much money's on the table.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. The federal government is imposing visa restrictions on Mexican nationals visiting Canada. Immigration Minister Mark Miller made the announcement last hour. It goes into effect later today.
As of today, at 11:30 p.m. Eastern, Mexican citizens will need a visa to come to Canada or obtain a valid electronic travel authorization if they hold a valid U.S. non-immigrant visa, or have held a Canadian visa in the past 10 years and are traveling by air on a Mexican passport.
The Liberal government relaxed visa restrictions for Mexican nationals in 2016, but Miller says a greater number of asylum seekers from the country has prompted the government to reintroduce the measure. Both the United States and Quebec Premier François Legault have been pushing the federal government to bring the requirement back. They argue it would help curb an increase in illegal crossings from Canada into the States. The fate of Quebec's controversial secularism law could be determined today. The province's Court of Appeal will issue its ruling on the constitutionality of Bill 21. The 5-year-old law bans government employees from wearing religious symbols. Robert Leckie is the dean of McGill University's Faculty of Law. He says today's decision is important because it seems the case will go to the federal Supreme Court.
We've got a trial decision. We'll now have an appellate decision. These things build in a very important way the record that will reach the Supreme Court of Canada.
The decision is expected this afternoon. Statistics Canada has just given us the latest snapshot on the health of the economy. The agency has released its 2023 fourth quarter report for gross domestic product. It edged up just slightly. That announcement is being watched by the Bank of Canada ahead of its interest rate announcement next week. Our senior business reporter, Peter Armstrong, has more.
These data paint the picture of an economy that's still chugging along in spite of all of the many headwinds it's facing. We've spent much of the last 6 months or so waiting and watching for signs of a recession. That double whammy of inflation and soaring borrowing costs were always going to slow the economy. The question was by how much? So an expansion through the final 3 months of 2023 mean we have once again avoided a technical recession, which of course is just 2 back-to-back quarters of negative growth. And the economy shrank in Q3, but Stats can revise that in today's numbers to a more modest contraction today and found Q4 grew at a 1% annualized rate. Now, the advanced estimate for January also indicates another positive showing. So, look, the economy is indisputably weak, but it's keeping its head above water and setting up a very real possibility of a soft landing where inflation comes back to normal without causing an outright recession. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are venturing south to separate Texas border towns today. Millions of undocumented migrants are entering the U.S. It's become a high-stakes political issue heading into November's presidential election. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington. And Richard, what can we expect today?
Yeah, I think we can expect to see a highly choreographed split-screen rivalry where Joe Biden and Donald Trump will offer competing views on how to fix America's immigration system. This has emerged as one of the key issues in November's election. Biden will head to the border town of Brownsville, where he's expected to pressure Congress to revive that bipartisan border security deal that Republicans supported until former President Trump told them to reject it. Now, this plan would tighten asylum restrictions and create daily limits on border crossings. This will be Biden's second trip to the border since taking office, which many view as a notable change in strategy to become more forceful to address illegal immigration, one of Biden's biggest vulnerabilities in this election.
And how about Trump and the Republicans?
Yeah, so Donald Trump will be about 500 kilometers away at Eagle Pass. That's a hot spot for illegal crossings. Now, Trump built his political career on portraying illegal immigrants as criminals and promising to build a wall along the border. He's since promised mass deportations if he wins the elections and took aim at illegal immigrants on social media.
Our country is being overrun by criminals, by murderers, by drug addicts. They're all coming in through Joe Biden's horrible open border.
Now, these two leaders don't agree on much, if anything, but both share the view there's a crisis along the southern border, but say the other party is responsible for it.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. For years, there had been speculation about 2 scientists fired from Canada's top infectious disease lab in Winnipeg. The real reason for their termination has been a mystery. Until now. As Karen Pauls tells us, a new report by Canada's spy agency confirms what many suspected. It had to do with the couple's ties to China.
Subsequent termination of the employment of 2 scientists.
After years of questions and political wrangling, we now know why Jianguo Chu and her husband Keating Cheng were fired from the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg. Mark Holland is the health minister.
They weren't disclosing information. They weren't disclosing relationships.
Chu is part of an award-winning team that developed Canada's Ebola vaccine. Now, intelligence assessments also show she and her husband shared infectious viruses and scientific research with China, had a close and clandestine relationship with Chinese officials, and were considered a credible threat to Canada's economic security.
Will he acknowledge espionage was involved in the Winnipeg lab incident?
For years, opposition politicians have fought for details to be released, accusing the government of using national security to shield itself from embarrassment. The health minister says
there was an inadequate understanding of the threat of foreign interference.
But security experts like Wesley Wark are skeptical.
We knew a lot and had known a lot for at least a decade about Chinese foreign interference activities in Canada.
Christian Leuprecht teaches at the Royal Military College of Canada.
This would have been deeply injurious to our relationship with China, and so I think the government made a political decision.
As for the lab, it says it's beefed up its security protocols and the rules for collaborating and sharing research with other countries. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. On our main page, the most read story at cbcnews.ca is about the Ottawa mother who mourned her son's death at a hospital. Then he sent her a text message. Read the story, cbcnews.ca on our main page. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, good morning, everyone. We got some light flurries this morning on a cloudy start to this last day of February, and a special day it is, February 29th. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC. Thanks for joining us on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Well, speaking of Leap Day, for some people, their birthday only comes around every 4 years. We're going to talk to someone with a Leap Day birthday about what it was like for him growing up and how old he is today. Does he consider himself 68 or 17? Also, this half hour on the program, would you pay more on your property taxes on your education tax portion of the bill for full-day kindergarten in your school division? That is what the Louis Riel School Division wants to do. They want to expand the program of full day to more schools. We'll talk to one of the trustees there. We're also going to talk to a parent who lives in the school division about how she feels about this proposed tax increase of 7.5%. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells with other stories. Good morning.
Good morning. A Winnipeg foster home provider that was giving cannabis to teens in care is blasting the province for cutting ties with the company. In a memo to staff, Spirit Rising House says the system is fraught with denial and turning a blind eye to the trauma and real epidemic of addiction these kids face. However, the president of the Manitoba Foster Parent Association says giving kids cannabis is not harm reduction. We'll hear more reaction coming up. And allegations this morning of a toxic environment at the Manitoba Teachers Society. That is the union for Manitoba teachers, and the allegations have led to a number of employees taking a leave from work and an external investigation. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into traffic and weather with Corey Funk.
Minus 17 right now at the Forks. Going to warm up a pretty decent amount today to minus 7 is going to be the high here in Winnipeg with some light snow that's already falling right now, coming a little bit sideways. That could be because we are getting a bit of a wind this morning, southeast around 30 kilometers an hour. That's going to end near noon. Up north, it is going to be a bit of a different morning for you. There's a snowfall warning and an extreme cold warning in effect for areas around Flin Flon, Cranberry, Portage, Snow Lake, Thompson, Nelson House, Split Lake, Lynn Lake, Leaf Rapids, Puckatawagan, Gillam, and Shamattawa right now. About 10 to 15 centimeters is expected between today and later on into Friday as well. This morning, very cold weathers, particularly around Thompson, Split Lake, Lynn Lake, Tadouli Lake, Gillam, and Shamattawa. 30 to minus 30 to minus 40 degrees right now. With that wind, going to feel more like minus 45. So very, very cold up north. Bring it back down here, though. Looking to tomorrow is going to be plus 5 tomorrow. So dress accordingly, as in some kind of T-shirt and flip-flops or something like that. Looking to your commute right now, very quiet out there. Haven't heard much going on. Besides on Chief Peguis Bridge going westbound or right on as you hit Main Street there's a stalled car in the right-hand lane. Thanks for that call that we got from Kathy. So keep left to get around that. That is causing some backups. If you see anything else going on, though, 204-788-3093.
Well, this extra day, February 29th, only comes around every 4 years, and we've been talking about leap year and leap day all week. And we asked people to call in to tell us how some of you were spending the day.
Good morning. My name is Ruth Christie, and I thought I'd share a funny story regarding leap year. In my community, when leap year came around, they said the girlfriend had that opportunity to propose to her boyfriend. And if he said no, he had to buy her a dress. But that was the saying in my community. If it's leap year, you could ask your boyfriend to marry you. Okay, I just thought I'd share that when we were sharing about the why we have that extra day in February.
Old school. I like that, though. It's a lovely perspective. Of course, yesterday we spoke to an astronomer about how leap year actually came about and how it works scientifically. You can find that interview on our CBC Listen app. Today, though, let's turn our attention to someone who has a leap year birthday. Kevin Wynn is turning 68 today, but some might argue he's younger, and he's on the line with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Marcy?
I'm well. Happy birthday.
Great. Can I just say, as a sidebar, I've followed your career for a while, and it's a real honor. I really appreciate it.
Oh my goodness. That's so very kind. Thank you, Kevin. I don't do math very well. If you follow my career, you know this. So how old are you? You're 68, actually. But how old are you if we only counted your leap year birthdays?
If you only counted my leap years, Marcy, I'm 17.
So do you use that as a running joke, or how does that come up in your life?
Well, other people tend to use it as a running joke. I think, frankly, a lot of people don't understand the concept. So that's often fun, too.
When do you actually celebrate your birthday? Because you don't get February 29th. We only get it every 4 years.
I've always said to people the closest Friday.
Got it.
Just so you can go out and relax and have dinner and socialize.
What was it like for you growing up? Because, when you're a kid, birthdays can be a big deal.
The one scenario I remember, I was about to turn 8, and I asked my mom, I said to my mom, this is unfair. Like every other kid in my class gets a real birthday. And she was very sweet, and she said, don't worry, we'll have your birthday the next day or Friday or whatever. So I got over it, ultimately.
How do you view it now? Do you view it as something special?
Into my 20s, it started to become, I found kind of almost a badge of honor. It was because it was so unique. So I kind of grew into it. I kind of lived it, so it improved. Let's put it that way. My attitude toward it.
You said, Kevin, that you think a lot of people actually don't get it. What are some of the common questions that people ask you when they find out that your birthday is on Leap Day, February 29th?
Well, I remember I worked with someone, this is about 25 years ago, and they asked me, so do you multiply by 4?
They didn't get math at all.
They didn't get math at all, no.
Yeah.
No.
You divide by 4, of course.
Yeah. I think the rarity of it is what intrigues people, because I've had innumerable people say that they have never known anyone who was born in leap year. So I've always found that kind of intriguing.
Now, what is really intriguing, and you tell me if this is true, it is rare, obviously, but you have a pretty close family member that was also born on a leap day?
I do. My dad's, his brother's daughter, who I think still lives in Saskatoon. I guess she's 4 years younger than I am or whatever. She and I made a commitment back in the 90s. We reconnected, and we started calling each other on leap year. And I think I said to your researcher, this will all inspire me to go back and reconnect with her. But she's a first cousin, so I thought that's always struck me as pretty unique.
Yeah, it is absolutely unique.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What's your favorite memory of your birthdays gone by? Obviously, connecting the cousin must be one of them.
My family did something special when I was turned 60, and then I remember back in my 20s when I was turning 24. I have a couple of cousins still in Ontario, and they did a really nice dinner for me, and they invited friends, and so that was special.
What are you going to be doing today, Kevin?
My fiance made me blueberry pancakes this morning, and she's making me dinner tonight. So that's about as good as it gets.
And does she consider herself dating a younger man or engaged to a younger man? Because are you 17 in her eyes?
I'll have to ask. I don't know.
Well, we have pulled something special for you, because if you only are going to have your birthday, technically, statistically every 4 years, then people better play this for you. Kevin Wynn, who is 17, aka 68. This is for you on your Leap Day birthday. Happy birthday, Kevin. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. How many candles on the cake?
That's very sweet of you. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Will you actually put 68 on the cake tonight and blow it out, or are you going to go for the 17?
If I'm lucky, I'll get a cake. We'll see.
Okay, let's start there. Well, I wish you a cake, and I wish you a happy birthday. And thank you so much for making time for us today and telling us about your unusual birthday, but also your special birthday, as you said.
Well, it was great to be included in your programming. Thanks a lot, Marcy.
No problem. You have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Kevin Wynn, local Winnipegger with a leap year birthday, leap day birthday specifically. And I know that often people will connect. Kevin talking about connecting with that other family member who was born on leap day. But there's also different social groups where people will connect online all over the world. Is it so unusual to have your birthday on February 29th? Right now it is 8:19 on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. And next on the show, as I've been mentioning, the Louis-Riel School Division wants to start universal full-day kindergarten this fall. I shouldn't say universal, pardon me. They want to expand it, though, to a number of more schools. But this does come at a price. The division is proposing a 7.5% increase in the education portion of your property tax bill to support it. Now, that is about $150 for the average homeowner. Dominique Shattuck is a parent of 2 kids and lives in the Louis-Riel School Division. Her kids, though, have gone already through kindergarten. She spoke this morning to CBC's Corey Funk about how she feels about this proposed increase.
I just feel like nobody wants to pay taxes, but if we want to live in an equitable society, like, we have to pay them. And the fact of the matter is that, especially coming out of the pandemic, there are so many children who have very high needs that aren't being met by the current services that the school divisions are able to provide just because of a lack of funding. And I think that especially like with the younger kids, like the more structure they have right now, because they didn't get that for so many years when we were, in that limbo and like kind of going back and forth between being in lockdowns and not, a lot of those developmental skills and social skills and all of those things that kids would normally have, like those are actually, like a lot of them are far behind. So for me, if I have to pay a little bit more in my taxes to make sure that the kids are getting what they need, for me as a parent, I'm on board with that.
And for you, I mean, your kids are older now, but when you think back to those kindergarten days when they were both that age, what difference would full-day daycare have made for you?
Well, I think that it's sort of a feminist issue because women tend to be the primary caregivers, right? And so I think that like it was really challenging, like in terms of childcare, especially like a lot of kids are in daycare and then all of a sudden they go to a half day. That can make childcare really, really tricky. And women I think it disproportionately affects women because they're the ones who tend to be the primary caregivers. And so it really is disruptive to the workday, or for women who are maybe returning back into the workforce. It's just, I've always questioned why we do half-day kindergarten anyway, so I feel like it's probably the right move, and I think some of the other school divisions do it. But I remember when my kids were in kindergarten, I always questioned why they didn't just go to school full day like everybody else, especially when the majority of them are coming out of a full day daycare scenario, which is even longer, right? Again, like I'm a little bit removed because my kids are a little bit older, but I just think that sometimes we get so stuck in thinking about what's only good for us, primarily like individually and, our own needs. And so I just think that this responsibility to sort of think of everybody, and that's how societies work, right? Like everybody sacrifices a little for the good of the community. And I mean, we're not talking about hundreds and hundreds of dollars a year.
Dominique Shattuck is a parent of 2 kids and lives in the Louis-Riel School Division. Now, Pamela Kolachuk is the Ward 4 trustee for that division and is with us now to talk about this proposed tax increase. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So can you...
I'm echoing.
Oh.
Or am I okay?
You sound okay. Are you hearing us all right?
Yeah, I'm hearing you fine.
Okay, great. So can you tell us a bit more about what you're hoping to do with this extra money in the division and why you feel it's needed?
Yeah, so we currently have 9 schools that do full day K in Louis-Riel School Division that we started as a pilot in 2016. And it's been something that the Board of Trustees has been focused on and trying to get more and more schools on every year. But as you know, we haven't been able to increase taxes or find money to be able to do that over the past few years, as we had no control over increasing property taxes. And, when it came to this year and looking at our multi-year strategic plan, we looked at what was one area that would have the largest impact if we were to increase taxes by an extra 1%. And that it looked like full day K was the item that would provide the biggest impact to our community, our parents, and to children that are our early learners that are entering our school system. And I just listened to your past interview or caller that was in favor of this from a women perspective in regards to being able to go back to work or be able to work a full day. And that's what we see the most is in our area is the ability to find childcare. And when you have half-day kindergarten, it is very hard to find childcare. So we want to make sure that we're listening to our community and finding ways to support them. And this is one of the ways that we felt could have the biggest impact on families and community in LRSD.
To look at the educational outcome aspect of this, it's interesting because, as you well know, the Winnipeg School Division, Manitoba's largest school division, actually axed their pilot program of full-day kindergarten in some schools. They said at the time they axed it, and it ran for 8 years, they said it didn't have the benefits on student learning and academic performance that they expected. So it didn't work educationally how they would think what they wanted it to. Why are you confident that the outcomes educationally will be there if you go this direction in Louis Riel?
We're seeing them today in our 9 schools that we have full day K in, but we're also looking at the learners that are coming up into kindergarten right now. And, even those that started kindergarten last year, they're the children that have been most impacted by the pandemic, by being, alone, not being able to socialize through that time of 2020 to 2022 when, everything was in lockdown. So they're coming into kindergarten when they went through this when they were 1.5 years old. So in order to bring them into the school system, bring them into community, bring them into learning as fast as possible is what we see as the most benefit for these children in order to hopefully remove barriers, but also help them develop and become better learners into grade 1, 2, and 3. And maybe we'll see less of those needs in that age, less of those requirements that require additional help if we have children in kindergarten all day, starting right away.
What would you say, just to look at this from another perspective, to a person in the division that says their taxes shouldn't pay for childcare needs, that they should go to direct educational outcomes? So if the bigger issue is childcare, there might be ways that needs to be funded and fixed for families because it's a real struggle, but that it shouldn't come on the education tax bill.
I would say I hear you, but daycares are meant for children that are not in school, in my opinion. And the federal government and provincial government supports daycares now. So technically, you may not be paying for it on your property tax, but you're paying for it in some roundabout way in order to ensure that we have the 10-day daycare prices. But we're also seeing in daycares that there isn't enough spots. So how can you have daycares, ask people to use daycares when there isn't enough spots for their children? That's, a huge struggle. And the federal government and provincial government are working on new spaces, but at the same time, they don't have employees in order to ECEs and all of those people to be able to do this.
I think it speaks to sort of, if there is someone out there, though, that says that they either don't have kids or maybe they have kids that aren't in childcare or those kindergarten ages anymore, that they may see it as a personal family responsibility to find the money to support childcare needs, that the school system shouldn't be involved. While I respect we're in a day and age, though, where we're all, as you heard some other people like Pamela, who we heard from, like Dominique, who we heard from, she says she's openly willing to do that societally. There may be others that feel that this isn't the right way to go about it. What are you finding is the position of schools and trustees, even like yourself, in having to navigate some of the needs and the gaps that are out there for families?
It's definitely hard. We're trying to fill the needs as best as we can with the dollars that we have. For LRSD, in order to balance our budget, we're looking at a 6.5% tax increase, and that's a huge increase in teachers to meet our need from a growing division standpoint, but also the needs in the classroom. So, while the people that might not have children in school, the needs that are happening in the classroom that need to be focused on and supported, whether it's through clinicians or speech therapy or psychologists or even EAs and reading support, all of those things support a community and people entering a workforce at the end of this. And we want to make sure that as we're developing our children in our schools, that they can be successful when they leave. right? So maybe you don't have children today, but these children might be taking care of you later, or they might, be doing something in relation to you once they leave school, and you have no idea. And I would hope that you would want somebody who's educated, who has, the ability to read and write, who has a commitment to community, who understands all of those things. And that comes through the education system. A lot comes through that, and the supports that come through what's happening in schools.
When do you vote on this, Trustee Kolachuk?
We vote on this on March 12th.
Thank you very, very much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Pamela Kolachuk, Ward 4 trustee for the Louis Riel School Division. They are looking at a proposed tax increase of 7.5%. They're talking about universal full-day kindergarten, and they are looking at expanding it from 9 of the schools right now to 30 in kindergarten, kindergarten students in nearly 60 classrooms across the division. If you want to read the story and the stats, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, we've got light snow. It's minus 17 right now, and it's leap year, leap day. We will take a leap with our temperature all the way up to minus 7. That's almost normal, and we do surpass normal. Tomorrow will be melting in Winnipeg on Friday. The foster home provider that was giving cannabis to at-risk youth in their care is blasting the province for cutting ties with them instead of finding a way to move forward. Their comments were made at a memo to staff that was shared with CBC News. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout has the latest.
Spirit Rising House claims its harm reduction strategies help teens stay away from hard drugs like meth and opioids, in part by providing cannabis to underage youth in its care. In a letter to staff, the owner said, "We have not shamed or punished our kids for their choices. We have tried to help." The memo said the company did its best to work inside a system fraught with denial and turning a blind eye to the trauma and real epidemic of addiction. It said it was very open about its strategies in every piece of literature it shared with CFS agencies. The province says there are legitimate approaches to harm reduction, but Spirit Rising House decided to take shortcuts which put already vulnerable youth at risk. The government says it stands behind its decision to cut ties with the company and move kids out. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Winnipeg.
We are hearing allegations this morning of a toxic workplace at the Manitoba Teachers Society. The Union for Teachers has about 70 support and administrative workers at its Winnipeg headquarters. Some of those staff have filed grievances alleging a toxic work environment. As according to Teamsters, which represents those Manitoba Teachers Society workers. Last year, Teamsters conducted a survey in which 57% of respondents said their workplace was psychologically unsafe. After that, the Manitoba Teachers Society hired a new HR director and an external investigation was conducted. The society isn't saying what the investigation found, but it says it is taking its employees' complaints seriously. Sources tell CBC News at least 10 workers have taken a leave from work. The parents of a toddler who died while they were out at bingo have been sentenced to house arrest. The 2-year-old boy and his 2 sisters, aged 5 and 6, were being looked after by their 9-year-old sister. A 16-year-old who was supposed to look after the young children did not show up. The mother admitted to staying at bingo, even though she found out the teen didn't show up, saying she wanted to see if she could win. The 9-year-old called 911 after finding blood coming from the boy's mouth, and he wasn't breathing. Investigators found the younger sisters had a leash around the boy's neck. The 54-year-old man and 33-year-old woman are sentenced to 2 years of house arrest and 3 years of probation. A First Nations community says it is concerned about how a massive raw sewage leak will impact the health of Lake Winnipeg. Hundreds of millions of liters of raw sewage were dumped into the Red River before Winnipeg City Crews put a stop to that spill last week. Broken Head Ojibwe First Nation Chief Gordon Bluesky wants someone to monitor the leak's long-term effects.
Communities around the lake draw their drinking water and actively utilize the lake. So where do we go from here? Our lake is already in a critical state. She's already sick, and we're just making her more sick.
Bluesky says he has met with Winnipeg's mayor and the province to discuss the situation. He says the lake needs to be protected for future generations. Staff at a Winnipeg nonprofit are working overtime trying to help a growing number of asylum seekers file refugee claims. Healthy Muslim Families says the number of people asking for help has tripled in the last few months. Nazum Sadiqa is the facilitator with the organization.
They don't have much information, so they don't remember a lot of dates, a lot of information. They don't have any evidence because they were going through the persecution, the torture, the detention and everything.
The organization says most people they help come from south of the border, but they say there's also a jump in claimants coming from other provinces, believing the process will be faster here. A Winnipeg man is happy city councillors are considering a traffic plan for his street. Tim Fennell is a founding member of the group Calm Cambridge. He's been calling for traffic calming measures on Cambridge Street for years. He says the street has thousands more vehicles than it was meant to handle, and drivers, he says, often ignore the 30-kilometer speed limit.
A lot of people would say, oh, well, this is an accident waiting to happen, but I would say accidents are happening. So time to do something.
A motion calling for interim short-term and long-term traffic plans passed a lower city committee last week. The Public Works Committee will consider it at its next meeting on Tuesday. If passed by council, city staff would have 120 days to come up with a plan. You can find more news updated throughout your day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, last look at our weather here quickly. We are expecting today these flurries might continue for us in a high of -7. Right now it's -17. And a last look at traffic. Corey, anything to report?
Yeah, just looking for a stalled car in the curb lane on westbound Chief Peguis just before Main Street. It's making a bit of a backup there last heard, so keep left to get around that.
We might take our last moment here to tell people that next Wednesday we are confirmed to do a very special live remote in a place where we actually haven't done our show from before.
Salvation Army.
Yeah, so we're going to be live from the Salvation Army next week. You might have heard some stories in the news this week about how they're one piece of the puzzle in where people are landing when they come here as refugees. They are often finding themselves at the Salvation Army. But you will be surprised when you hear actually all of the different programs that run out of that building. So we're going to explore some of that with the people, of course, who live there. So that show is next Wednesday.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I am as well. So next Wednesday. Right now, though, time to say goodbye for our show this morning. So thanks to our team of associate producers, our leaders in unit, Leif Larson and Nellie Gonzalez. Thanks to our news department, Megan Ketchison, as well as Aaron Broman and Heather Wells out there, and our live team, Corey Funk, May McKillop, and Brad Lillies. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Take care, everyone. Be well. The Current is coming up next.